Good morning, and welcome to the Town of Hampton's 2010 deliberative session. My name is Bob Casaza. I'll serve as your moderator today. The warrant has been posted according to law, and at this time I would ask you to rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. The pledge will be led this year by Hampton resident Captain Mike Edgar. Last year at this time, when we assembled, Captain Edgar was headquartered in Kuwait as a member of the U.S. Navy with responsibilities throughout Kuwait, Iraq, and Afghanistan. We are glad that Captain Edgar has returned home safely and thank him for his 26 years of service. Captain Edgar.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Captain Edgar. At this time, I'd like to introduce the officials on the stage. To my right, Rick Griffin, Chairman of the Board, Jerry Zanoy, Dick Nichols, the Town Manager, Fred Welch, Town Attorney, Mark Gerald, the Finance Director, Michael Schwartzer. I believe the Chairman of the Budget Committee is here, Mary Louise Wilsey. The Administrative Assistant, Christina Osman, is behind me to my right. In the hall, Supervisors of the Checklist, Arlene Andriozzi, Davina Larrabee, and Barbara Renault. Assisting the supervisors this morning are Martha Williams and Teresa Ryan. Assisting the moderator today are Dennis Kilroy, Nathan Page, Darrell Mosher, Glenn Eastman, Howard Stiles, Ken Lobdell, and Nancy Stiles. Mary Borg from the Hampton School District has furnished the food in the hall, and lunch will be available courtesy of the Winnicott High School girls basketball boosters. This time I'd like to explain the workings of the deliberative session. Today's session is to explain, discuss, debate, and possibly amend the 41 articles set forth in the warrant, with the exception of those warrant articles whose wording is prescribed by law. For example, the zoning articles, which will appear at the beginning of the warrant. It is not necessary to vote these articles onto the ballot. All 41 will appear on the March 9 ballot. The work of the deliberative session this morning and this afternoon is to determine the wording of these articles, to determine how the articles will appear on the ballot. Final action will come on March 9 at the Winnicott High School Gymnasium, where voting will be conducted from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. The rules of today's meeting. We will proceed one article at a time. I will read the article. After the article has been moved and seconded for discussion, I will recognize the proponent of the article first, and then open the article for discussion by the Assembly. I will recognize a new speaker on an article before returning to someone who has already spoken on the article, with the exception that the proponent of the article will be permitted to answer questions or offer further details regarding the purpose of the article in response to a question or opinion as appropriate. All questions should be directed to the moderator. If you wish to speak, please wait to be recognized by the moderator and speak into the microphone. This is critical to ensure that your remarks are carried by the cable broadcast, and Channel 22 technicians will adjust the microphones at the podium if needed. And you'll note this year we have some additional lighting, and that lighting is designed to make the quality of the production better at home. Please begin your remarks by stating your name and address. We will deal with only one amendment at a time. The amendments must be in writing. After the amendment has been moved and seconded, please give the written amendment to me so I can have it correctly stated, and the administrative assistant can as well. And there is paper for the purposes of writing amendments on the stage to my left. Please focus on the content of the amendment or the article and refrain from personal comments. The moderator will revoke recognition of any speaker who speaks or acts in an abusive or disruptive manner. The moderator will also revoke recognition of any speaker who refuses to keep his or her comments relevant to the article under consideration. Non-residents will be allowed to speak on the affirmative vote of the meeting. If an issue arises during the meeting that is not covered by these rules, I intend to use fairness and majority rule as guiding principles with due consideration for the minority's right to be heard. This is your meeting, and as a result, the determination of the moderator may be overruled. Voting will be conducted by voice, hand, or standing vote as appropriate. 5 voters may make a request in writing prior to a vote that the vote be taken by secret written ballot. After the vote has been declared and before any other business has begun, any non-ballot vote may be questioned by 7 voters, and the vote shall be retaken by secret yes/no ballot. Reconsideration of votes previously taken may be restricted at any time during the meeting by an affirmative vote of the meeting. I'd ask you please to turn off any cell phones while the meeting is in session. Per the state fire code, please note the location of the exits. If the fire alarm activates, please leave the building by the nearest exit. Please assist anyone that needs help and assemble in front of the SAU 21 building. At this time, I would entertain a motion to allow non-resident staff of the town of Hampton to speak during the meeting, to answer questions, and to provide information regarding a warrant article, specifically the following individuals: Town Manager Fred Welch, Town Attorney Mark Gerald, the Building Inspector Kevin Schultz, the Finance Director Mike Schweitzer, Recreation and Parks Director Diana Martin, the Assessor Ed Tinker, the Planner Jamie Steffen, the Administrative Assistant Christina Osman, and the Public Works Director John Price. Is anyone who make that motion? Moved by Mr. Griffin, seconded by Mr. Bateman. All in favor? Please signify by raising your hand. Down hand. Any opposed? The motion carries. And at this time, I would like to also recognize that on the stage, Selectman Bateman and Selectman Lally. Welcome. To the warrant. Article 1. To choose by nonpartisan ballot 1 selectman for a 3-year term, 1 town clerk for a 3-year term, 1 moderator for a 2-year term, 1 supervisor of the checklist for a 6-year term, 1 trustee of the trust funds for a 3-year term, 1 library trustee for a 3-year term, 1 library trustee for a 2-year term, 1 library trustee for a 1-year term, 2 planning board members for a 3-year term, 1 cemetery trustee for a 3-year term, 4 budget committee members for a 3-year term, and 1 zoning board member for a 3-year term. The filing period for these offices closed on Friday, yesterday. We need to select the order in which the candidates for the contested offices will appear on the ballot. I'll read to you those individuals who signed up for all offices, contested or uncontested, and then we'll do a random drawing for those 4 races where we have a contested situation. For the office of selectman, there was 1 individual who has signed up, and that is Rick Griffin. For town clerk, 1 individual, Jane Cipher. For moderator, 1 individual, Robert Casaza. Supervisor of the checklist, 1 individual, Arlene Andrioza. For trustee of the trust funds, there are 2 individuals who have filed for election, William Hartley and Michael Pierce. This time, I'd like to, with the assistance of the town clerk, draw names for the ordering of that race. William Hartley. So Michael Pierce's name will appear as second on the ballot for that race. Library trustee, 3-year term, Linda Sadlock. Library trustee, 2-year term, Sonny Kravitz. Library trustee, 1-year term, Gary Meyer. Planning board, 3 individuals have signed up, making it a contested race. Fran McMahon, Keith Lassard, and Scott Eagleson. So we will draw for the seating of that race. And the first name is Keith Lassard. Second name is Fran McMahon, and Scott Eagleson will appear third on the ballot for the planning board seat. Cemetery trustee, 2 individuals for 1 spot, making it a contested race. The individuals are Susan Irwin and Richard W. Bateman. Let me do it again. Yeah, can you shake those apart? First name, Richard W. Bateman. So Susan Irwin's name will appear second on the ballot. Final race, Budget Committee. There are 5 individuals who filed for 4 positions. The individuals who filed are as follows: Mary Louise Woolsey, Gary Meyer, Mark McFarland, Michael Pierce, Eileen Latimer. First name on the ballot will be Mark McFarland. Followed by Mary Louise Woolsey. Michael Pierce. Gary Meyer. And then Eileen Latimer will be the fifth name on the ballot. Article 2. Are you in favor of the adoption of Amendment 1 as proposed by the Planning Board for the Hampton zoning ordinance as follows? Amend Article 3 to add a new use regulation, Section 3.44, for properties fronting on Ocean Boulevard from the northerly portion of Ocean Boulevard where it intersects with Ashworth Avenue south to the northerly side of N Street that limits the use of the first 25 feet of depth on of the ground floor of any building measured from the front of a structure to non-residential principal uses permitted in the business seasonal district. Entries, lobbies, stairs, and elevators providing pedestrian access to permitted upper floor residential uses not exceeding 20% of the ground floor area shall also be permitted. Recommended by the Planning Board. Entertain a motion to open discussion on Article 2. Moved by Mr. Lupley. Is there a second? Seconded by Mr. Griffin. Mr. Lupley, as Chairman of the Planning Board, would you like to speak to Article 2?
Yes. This amendment is proposed to add a new use regulation that would apply only to the first 25 feet of the ground floor of buildings fronting on Ocean Boulevard from the northerly portion where it intersects with Ashworth Avenue south to the northerly side of N Street. This regulation would limit the first 25 feet of ground floor to commercial retail uses allowed in the business seasonal zoning district only, with the exception of entries, lobbies, stairs, and elevators that provide pedestrian access to the permitted upper floor residential uses not exceeding 20% of the ground floor area. The intent of this amendment is to help maintain the commercial vitality of the central core of the beach strip and to encourage mixed use for new or redevelopment uses in this area.
Thank you, Mr. Lupley. Is anyone else? Mr. Emmerich.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I'm here in opposition to this article, even though I'm a member of the Planning Board. I believe there's enough regulations now. We have zoning that tells us, how to build things and building codes, how to build things. We have genre in our zoning that says this has to be residential, or in this particular zone is fairly liberal. But I just don't think it's our job to tell people what they have to build. We can tell them what can be done, but not what must be done. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Emmerich. Anyone else? Mr. Nyan.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. John Nyan, 4 Penniman Lane, and I speak to this warrant article as chairman of the Hampton Beach Area Commission. The Beach Commission is a state advisory board that was established back in 2003 to implement the Hampton Beach Area Master Plan. As part of its duties, includes consultation and advice to the town and to the state to accomplish the goals of the master plan of the beach. With that, at the last commission meeting this past week, it was voted by the commissioners to recommend and advise the town and the town residents to vote in favor of the recommendation of the planning board, since it was felt that it fit very nicely into the master plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Nyan. Anyone else wishing to be heard? Seeing none. Article 3. And these are the these zoning articles, the final form of these articles is determined by the planning board, so this is for discussion purposes this morning, but they will appear on the ballot as they are printed. Article 3, are you in favor of the adoption of amendment number 2 as proposed by the planning board for the Hampton zoning ordinance as follows? Amend Article 2, Section 2.7, Professional Office, Residential District, subsection C, Use Regulations, 1, Principal Uses, B, Professional Services, to reword this section to make it consistent with the existing wording in the Article 3, Section 3.22 as to banks, offices, and professional establishments such as insurance agencies, real estate offices, attorney offices, medical professionals, and/or other similar businesses providing direct services to consumers. Recommended by the Planning Board. I'll entertain a motion to open discussion on Article 3. Moved by Ms. Woolsey. Do I have a second? Seconded by Mr. Diner. Mr. Lupley, would you like to speak to this, Mr. Chairman?
This amendment is basically administrative change that would simply modify the use regulation subsection of the professional office residential zoning district for professional services to make it consistent with the existing use regulation in the zoning ordinance for professional uses and establishments such as banks, insurance agencies, real estate offices, attorney offices, and medical professionals.
Thank you, Mr. Lupley. Anyone wishing to be heard on Article 3? Mr. Moody.
Art Moody, 3 Thompson Road. These comments are also for the next 2 articles, since it's the same rezoning. POR, professional, whatever it stands for. The planning board has tried to, this is second or third attempt. This voters turned down the previous 1 or 2. This is a district that they are calling mixed use. It is mostly residential now. That's the fad now, mixed use. The fad used to be other types of zoning. Now it's mixed use. And what they're going to do is mongrelize areas of High Street that was Residence B, and Winnicott Road that was Residence A. The B zone was east of Toll Avenue by Academy Avenue to Mill Road, both sides. All the private properties on both sides can convert or have offices or other uses compatible to what they're trying to do here. I am against this and the next 2 articles for that reason. Why change it? Why allow something that they don't even have parking requirements for in their new 3-article array? We have tens of thousands of square feet of vacant office buildings, spaces on Route 1 and the business district on the west end of High Street. We don't need any more offices. Go up and down Route 1, large signs, whole floors in the business zone are up for lease and have been for a year or so. So why change this just because it's the current fad, mixed use?
Thank you, Mr. Moody. Anyone else wishing to be heard on Article 3? Seeing none, we'll move to Article 4. Are you in favor of the adoption of Amendment Number 3 as proposed by the Planning Board for the Hampton zoning ordinance as follows? Amend Article 2, Section 2.7, Professional Office, Residential District, subsection D, height setback and area regulations to add new and amended provisions for the district's dimensional requirements. Entertain a motion to open discussion on Article 4. Moved by Mr. Griffin, seconded By Mr. Bateman. Mr. Lupley.
This amendment is another administrative change that modifies the height, setback, and area regulations for the professional office residential zoning district to clarify the specific requirements for residential and non-residential uses, and to add new requirements for lot frontage, lot width, maximum height, and the maximum amount of sealed surfaces.
Thank you, Mr. Lupley. As I understand it, this also pertains to the area, as Mr. Moody stated, between Toll Avenue and Mill Road and between Winnicott Road and High Street. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Anyone else wishing to be heard? Seeing none, we'll move to Article 5. Are you in favor of the adoption of Amendment Number 4 as proposed by the Planning Board for the Hampton zoning ordinance as follows? Amend Article 2, Section 2.7, Professional Office, Residential District, subsection F, signs, and Article 5, signs, tables 1 and 2, to add specific requirements for signs in this district, recommended by the Planning Board. Entertain a motion to open discussion on Article 5, moved by Mr. Lupley, seconded by Mr. Lally. Mr. Lupley, would you speak to this as chair of the Planning Board?
This amendment is proposed to add specific requirements for proposed signs in the office and residential district. The types of signs and their sizes permitted in the district would be added to the sign tables with this amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Lupley. Anyone else wishing to be heard on Article 5? Mr. Moody.
At the December 16th hearing of the 6 articles of the Planning Board, I was the only person from the public that spoke. And the law is that if you have changes in the first hearing, you have a second hearing. Well, all 6 articles were changed verbally. There was nothing in writing in front of the Planning Board members. I don't know how they could determine the final wording of the ordinance, which they're required to vote on. But they did on 4 of them. And this one, they changed from prohibited to permitted on one type of sign. Now, I call that a substantial change, 180-degree change, but they didn't go to a second hearing on that. The 2 that they did go to second hearing on, January 6th, were supposed to be Planning Board Articles 3 and 5, according to the minutes of the hearing on December the 16th. But the minutes of the hearing on 6th of January show that that hearing was on proposals 3 and 6. And those minutes were approved on the 20th of January by the Planning Board.
Thank you, Mr. Moody. Does anyone wish to speak to Mr. Moody's comments or address the article further? Seeing none, we'll move to Article 6. Are you in favor of the adoption of Amendment Number 5 as proposed by the Planning Board for the Hampton zoning ordinance as follows? Amend Article 2, Section 2.3, Wetlands Conservation District, in Section 2.3.3, Permitted Uses, to add wording for a new Section 2.3.3.A.6 and a new Section 2.3.3.B.9, both entitled Landscaping, to clarify if a special permit is needed for that activity. I'll entertain a motion to open discussion on Article 6. Moved by Ms. Woolsey, seconded by Mr. Griffin. Mr. Lupley, would you care to speak to this as chair of the Planning Board?
This amendment is proposed to add new wording to the Wetlands Conservation District that would allow landscaping as permitted use in areas that have been previously disturbed or cleared or are maintained as lawn or beach, provided those areas are not being expanded.
Thank you, Mr. Lupley. Anyone else wishing to be heard on Article 6? Seeing none, we'll move to Article 7. Are you in favor of the adoption of Amendment Number 6 as proposed by the Planning Board for the Hampton zoning ordinance as follows? amend Article 18, Solar Panels Ordinance, to delete Section 3, Roof-Mounted Solar Panels, subsection B, to allow roof-mounted solar panels to be located on any roof face which provides the effective and efficient performance from the system being installed. Entertain a motion to open discussion on Article 7. Moved by Ms. Woolsey. Do I have a second? Seconded by Mr. Traynor. Mr. Lupley, would you like to speak to this article?
This amendment is proposed to delete the existing wording in the solar panel ordinance that restricts the placement of the roof-mounted panels to the rear or side-facing roofs only. By passing this amendment, it would allow the roof-mounted solar panels to be located on any roof face, thereby maximizing the efficiency and the performance of the system.
Thank you, Mr. Lupley. Anyone else wishing to be heard on Article 7? Mr. Moody.
At the December 16th hearing, I accused the planning board of bait and switch operation. Last March, their article on this article that you're now amending a year later on the ballot read as Article 3 on the warrant. New article, solar panels with associated zoning requirements to allow for their installation with appropriate safeguards and with due consideration to visual appearance, and to renumber the articles that follow accordingly. What you read in that article mainly was the fact that you were going to be protected from visual pollution. Safeguard, appropriate safeguards, due consideration for visual appearance. Now they're taking that out. So I call that bait and switch. And you won't see the full ordinance on any of these, not even in the selectmen's warrant. There's no paper trail. It won't be in the town report, which is the only thing that's permanently required to be kept. You would just see gists, which is legal on the ballot, but I don't think it's legal in the selectmen's warrant. The whole thing should be there. You're making laws that everybody with private property has to follow.
Mr. Moody, what was the year of the article that you read, the previous article?
Tuesday, March 10th, 2009.
Thank you. So as I understand Mr. Moody's comments, he is contrasting this year's article with a 2009 warrant article, and I understand this year's article to allow, if passed, solar panels to be on either side of a roof for efficiencies, where I think Mr. Moody is suggesting that in the 2009 warrant there would be consideration relative to visuals in any permitting. Is that the gist of it, Mr. Moody? The previous law would restrict the solar panels with consideration to whether they were visually harmful.
In my estimation, that's one of the reasons it got passed 5-1.
I'm just trying to put some context.
But I was ridiculed at the planning board hearing by the previous chairman that was chairman a year ago. After I made my spiel, I was ridiculed by comments such as, you don't think we'd propose something that just were able to put panels on the north side. Well, I didn't consider that a ridicule of me, but the planning board itself and that chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Moody. Any other comments on Article 7? Seeing none, we'll move to Article 8. Article 7 was the last of the zoning articles, the last of the articles where the language was fixed. So we'll move into that portion of the warrant where amendments are generally permissible. Article 8, shall the town of Hampton raise and appropriate as an operating budget, not including appropriations by special warrant articles and other appropriations voted separately, the amount set forth in the budget posted with the warrant or as amended by vote of the first session for the purposes set forth herein totaling $24,364,484. Should this article be defeated, the operating budget shall be $24,374,733, which is the same as last year with certain adjustments required by previous action of the town meeting or by law, or the governing body may hold one special town meeting in accordance with RSA 4013, 10, and 16 to take up the issue of a revised operating budget only. Majority vote required. Note, the warrant article, operating budget, does not include appropriations proposed in any other warrant article, not recommended by the Board of Selectmen, recommended by the Budget Committee. Fiscal impact note from the Finance Department, the proposed operating budget of $24,364,484 is $1,189,479 less than the budget amount adopted in 2009 of $25,553,963, which included a $650,203 cost related to NHRS HB 1645 spike charge. The net estimated 2010 tax rate impact of the proposed operating budget is a negative 18 cents per thousand valuation. The default budget figure of $24,374,733 is $1,179,230 less than the budget amount adopted in 2009 of $25,553,963, which also included a $650,203 cost related to NHRS HB 1645 spike charge. The net estimated 2010 tax rate impact for the default budget is a negative 18 cents per thousand valuation. I'll entertain a motion to open discussion on Article 8. Ms. Woolsey?
Yes. Before I make my motion, may I approach the moderator for a second?
Your echoing, I think your microphone is too close to your head. It's really causing hearing problems. And when you turn to the left, it's hard to keep you on.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. The moderator has a lot of good things to say, so we want to make sure we can hear him.
I just want to get a motion, excuse me, Ms. Woolsey, motion to open discussion on Article 8.
Yes, I
Moved
so
by Ms.
move.
Woolsey and seconded by Mr. Traynor. Ms. Woolsey.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I watched the Board of Selectmen's meeting last Monday night, and I want to correct a little misconception. There is no such thing as a selectman's budget. RSA 32:16 is entitled Duties and Authority of the Budget Committee. Roman 1, to prepare the budget as provided in RSA 32:5. Roman 2, to confer with the governing body or bodies and with other officers, department heads, and other officials relative to estimated costs, revenues anticipated, and services performed to the extent deemed necessary by the Budget Committee. It shall be the duty of all such officers and other persons to furnish such pertinent information to the Budget Committee. I know sometimes people have the philosophy that if you repeat misinformation often enough and long enough, that people will begin to take it as a fact. There is no such thing, ladies and gentlemen, as a selectman's budget. The Budget Committee prepares a budget, which we are presenting to you this morning. That budget is discussed at the deliberative session, forwarded to the voters in March for a vote, and it then becomes the people's budget, the budget of the people of the town of Hampton, which the selectmen by law are allowed to administer. After conducting work sessions related to the estimated costs presented to us, we have set in place a recommended budget for 2010. We restored funding in the planning and zoning line to pay for access to contracted services provided by the Rockingham Planning Commission. We increased the police department budget to just $10,000 under the manager's recommended figure. We increased funding for the fire department to just under $4,000 under the manager's recommended figure. We increased highway and street funding to the exact amount recommended by the manager. We reduced paving and reconstruction in public works by $316,574. We increased public works sanitation administration line by $13,035. We increased public works solid waste collection to the manager's recommendation of $681,333. We reduced public works solid waste disposal by $26,385. We increased the library budget by $4,828. We increased the financial administration budget by $716 to restore the 30% cut in overtime wages. Keep that in mind. The resulting budget figure that you have before you is 4.65% lower than the 2009 default/operating budget. Why the adjustments to the estimated cost figures that were presented to us? Your 15-member budget committee, the largest elected board, committee, or commission in town, is an accurate reflection of the interests and needs of the community at large. We are a mix of old and new members, long experience and not so long. Our job is to address funding the needs of this town while understanding the current fiscal environment, which is not encouraging. There is not a member of the committee, and I dare say no one at this meeting today, who has not been impacted negatively by the economic downturn. Yet we also understand that as a community, many positive things can happen by pooling our resources and working together. Our focus remains on hometown security and the ability of our emergency service responders to perform the services they have been trained to provide. If you notice on the news, Homeland Security for the United States of America has stated time and again that community first responders are the first line of defense for us and our safety. We considered the Selectmen's stated goal of cutting overtime by 30% and rejected it as misleading, short-sighted, and unrealistic. Mathematically, Mr. Schweitzer was able to take 30% from each overtime line in the budget. But one of the first line items we restored was the $716,000 in financial services overtime. Why? Because we are more realistic than our colleagues and understand that some areas of town government require, and will always require, overtime to do their job adequately. You and I do not believe for a moment that our finance officer will be denied a request for extra staff at overtime wages when he's preparing for the annual audit. It is misleading at best to tell you so. And as a committee this year, we have had more than enough of failure to provide information in a timely manner, providing misleading information, and outright falsehood. And this applies to both the town and school budget preparation. One thing that occurred to me in the weather in the last couple of days is problems with the weather, with the freezing cold, and you see on the news the terrible ice storm in Oklahoma and Arkansas. And it occurred to me to ask, and I asked Mr. Welch as I came in, where's our generator? Ice storm of 2008, December. Many of us have taken measures since that to secure our homes and property. Where is the generator? Where has this Board of Selectmen been this whole past year in seeing to it that an emergency generator is provided for the Hampton Town office? What if we have another ice storm? There are things that need to be focused on that are more important than worrying about 30% cuts in overtime. In Public Works, we anticipated a reduction in costs with mandatory recycling. And we hope you're all working as hard as you can to get with that and help us reduce our waste stream. And there's also the potential to remove the burden of the collection of commercial waste, which should result in continued long-term savings. In Public Works, if a drain or sewer line is clogged in the middle of the night, streets are flooding, catch basins overflowing, and you have an ice storm with fallen trees and debris in the streets, do you really think that staff is not going to be called out on overtime? In the police department, and Chief Sullivan is here this morning, He has a severe understaffing problem of special officers, which is a tremendous strain on the entire department. He's probably praying for rain all this coming summer too, because that's about the only thing that saved the police department this past year. We need to see more focus on providing adequate staffing in our emergency departments. And then, of course, we have the fire department. Chief Silver, in November of 2008, took over a fire department severely understaffed, inadequate facilities, and half of his pumper engines, half of the 4 engines, need to be replaced. Think of the fire on Winnicott Road a week ago today. Think of the men who had to respond to that fire and the personnel it takes in a situation like that. 12 lives at stake in that property. 12 lives. What are people's lives worth? What is their property worth? We own 3 emergency rescue ambulance units, 2 frontline and 1 reserve unit, fully equipped and ready to respond to our needs. But only 1 ambulance is in service due to short staffing in the fire department. And if a second ambulance is needed, you will need to understand that instead of an immediate response, you or your family member is going to have to wait for at least 2 firefighters to come back to the station on callback, a delay in time for you and overtime. If callback is not successful, we request mutual aid, increasing the response time and losing revenue, as the town which responds to our call with their ambulance gets the billing credit. This is a no-win situation. Even with the 4 positions lost in the fire department in 2005, restored in 2008 by Budget Committee funding, this chief has very, very little flexibility on callback and filling shifts in case of an absence or illness. In other words, we placed the money where our mouths are, and we still realize that this is far from adequate. We expect the Board of Selectmen in its capacity for prudential management of this town to understand the needs of the emergency services and provide for them. We have a huge investment in the training and longevity of these employees. Are we willing to sacrifice the past 30 years of steady improvement in the capability of these departments for the sake of a fake quick fix of cutting 30% of overtime? This Board of Selectmen is going to try today to get you to vote for increases to this operating budget figure in hopes of encouraging the voters to reject it, supplying selectmen with a second year of opportunity to revise the budget. Last year, they removed $450,000, which they then used to reduce the tax rate. That helped us, you say? Now consider the $1.6 million surplus at the end of last year, which they've now divided up into articles on this warrant that say no tax impact. Wrong. They have been squirreling unreserved fund balances to be used for their choice of projects under the guise of free money. As my friend and former moderator John Walker was fond of saying, no free lunch. Now that our fiscal situation has been stabilized, unreserved fund balances need to be surrendered at the end of each year to reduce our taxes. We do appreciate the job Mr. Welch has done in restoring our fiscal stability after the Barrington years. We understand the need to retain the approximate $3.2 million to cushion the non-payment of late payment of taxes and to reduce TAN borrowing. But now that we're reasonably stable, every effort should be made to treat each tax year as self-contained and return the surplus to reduce our taxes. This is going to be a long day, with conflicting claims and promises, more figures than you ever want to hear, and we'll all go home exhausted. But we have a special incentive to represent not only ourselves, but the other voters who have chosen not to attend this session. Today's the time when final decisions are made on ballot choices. On March 9th, the voters' only choice will be yes or no. So as you decide how to vote on each warrant article, pause and ask yourself a question. What benefit do you see for this town, and whose explanation do you trust?
Thank you, Ms. Woolsey. Is there anyone on the Board of Selectmen who wishes to speak to Article 8? Not at this time. Yes, please.
June White, 8 River Ave. I'd like to move to amend the operating budget to reduce a total amount of $136,174 by zeroing out the following line items. Town attorney wages, legal assistant, staff development, supplies and expenses, motor vehicle allowance, for a total of $136,174.
Ms. White has made a motion to amend the budget by reducing the budget amount $136,174. Is there a second to that motion? Seconded by Ms. Libby.
Can I
I'd like
also...
to speak to the motion to amend, Ms. White.
Yeah. This brings the proposed operating budget to a figure of $24,228,310, which is $1,325,653 less than the budget adopted in 2009. It also still leaves $321,174 in account 41532 for legal expenses.
Thank you, Ms. White. Is there anyone else who would like to speak to the White amendment? We are dealing with the White amendment at this time. Anyone else wishing to be heard on the White amendment? Mr. Rice. Thank you.
Fred Rice, 15 Heather Lane. I'd heard that this was going to come up as a subject today, so last night I did a little bit of homework. I have a collection that was started by my dad many years ago of all the town reports going back to the 1950s. And I went into the summary pages for the budget for the amounts expended in various departments. At the Budget Committee public hearing recently, this was also discussed, and I heard the attorney stand up and talk about how much money the town had saved by having an in-house counsel. To find out whether whether we had really been saving money, I copied out a few of the pages that have the summaries that include the overall legal expense. In the year 2000, my last year on the Board of Selectmen, the actual expenditures for the previous year were $162,500, approximately. In the year 2003, that jumped to $199,000. 2004, it dropped a little bit. It went down to just under $150,000. But then we took off to the races. In 2005, it jumped to $218,000. This is the line 4153, legal expense. In 2008, it went to $264,000. In 2009, $309,000. And in 2010, this is out of the current proposed budget, last year's expense was $487,000. So if we have saved money since having an in-house counsel, it's gone from $200,000 to almost $500,000. I just offer that to you as a point of clarification for any further discussion that may ensue. Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you, Mr. Rice. Mr. Workman, on the White amendment.
Yes. Jim Workman, Winnicott Road. I thought I wasn't going to have to speak to this inanity until sometime later on this afternoon, but first, it's a bottom line budget, so taking money out of specific line items is not going to effectuate the cause that I think Ms. White's looking for. The total monies that Mr. Rice just mentioned are not wages, overhead. They are inclusive of settlements, judgments, etc. So as society becomes more litigious, costs are going to go up. You look at the amount of suits that have been filed over the years since we've had an in-house counsel, and those have all gone up, and it's not because the town is going out and suing people, it's because people are suing the town. So having that cost in-house, it's about somewhere between $90 and $100, inclusive of the whole office per hour. Outside counsel is going to cost somewhere between $200, $300 an hour. And if you negotiate a rate down because you have a bulk discount, it's probably around $250, so that's still 2.5 times the cost. It's efficient to have it in-house. It is, you have the knowledge, you have daily experience, and it's a knowledge and an insight that you wouldn't have from outside counsel. In my job, I manage outside counsel, and they do not do nearly as efficient job as having somebody actually there day to day. And to the point about the number of suits being filed, even you look at the ones where the vast majority of them, the town is the defendant, it's not the town out suing people, and even in the ones where the town is the plaintiff, it's not because the in-house counsel on a whim decides to go sue someone. He's following the direction of the town manager and the Board of Selectmen. So taking this money out of the budget is foolish.
Thank you, Mr. Workman. Mr. Nichols.
This is one of several initiatives in the past month attempting to impair the town's legal resources. Comparisons have been made showing that Hampton's legal costs are higher than towns of similar size. Other comparisons have been made between current and historical expense levels. I believe comparison and analysis is a good thing. However, it can be deceiving when it focuses on isolated facts without putting together the whole picture. It is accurate to state that the town's legal costs have gone up substantially in recent years, about $135,000 a year, comparing the last 5 years of the decade with the preceding 5. Other parties have initiated the overwhelming majority of the matters. In most cases, the town is simply defending itself. Almost all of the cost increase has been in the area of outside versus in-house counsel. Collective bargaining and contractual disputes with employee unions have accounted for the largest part of the increase, an average of about $100,000 per year. 2 high-dollar amount lawsuits, in which the town was the defendant, required the use of specialized outside counsel at considerable expense. I would point out that these lawsuits were not lost, they were settled, and they were settled for less than 20 cents on the dollar. Bear in mind that it is the actions and the decisions of the Board of Selectmen, the Planning Board, and the Zoning Board, not the legal department, that decides the course of action in these matters. The Board of Selectmen, in the 2 years I have been on the board, has been kept informed of all matters and made the relevant decisions. I do not recall one that was not unanimous. When making comparisons to other towns, you have to consider factors that don't apply to other towns. The density of properties on the beach, condo conversions of multifamily properties and hotels, wetlands issues, as well as the fact that the town and all 6 of the unions are in the 4th year of operating under the doctrine of status quo, are several examples of issues that make Hampton different and affect the legal expenditures. I would also point out that in the last 2 years, there have been many occasions in which we have avoided or deferred any sort of legal action. I'm not in favor of this. The presentation only illustrates a portion of the picture. The hourly rate for outside counsel is more than double our fully burdened inside cost. That cost assessment was made by the finance director. Shifting to the exclusive use of outside counsel, which is what is suggested by this motion, I believe would increase the town's expenses by several $100,000.
Thank you, Mr. Nichols. Ms. Gethel, to the White Amendment. But before we get to Ms. Gethel, is the audio acceptable to the audience? No. Okay. All right. Excuse me? All right. So I would ask the technicians here today if they could work to make the audio more comprehensible to the audience. Okay.
There's too much bass and not enough volume.
Okay. So there's concern about a lack of volume and too much bass. We're working on it. Okay. I knew you would be. We'll proceed with Ms. Gethel, and I ask the audience's indulgence while we work through and fine-tune. Ms. Gethel.
I'm going to be very quick, and I apologize I didn't see the very beginning of this amendment, but the in-house counsel has been an incredible asset to the Conservation Commission. We use in-house counsel, I'd say 3 times a week at least, sometimes every day, for issues that have to do with either violations or land acquisition. The amount of money that we would have had to spend to hire an outside counsel is astronomical, and we would not have been able to acquire the lands that we have because the amount of legal work that goes into An easement like the Hurd Farm is ongoing for years. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Gaethel. Yes, Mr. Guthrie. On the White Amendment.
Yes. Thank you. Andrew Guthrie, Boston Ave. I'm voting in favor of this amendment, and the reason being is we've spent money last year to try to negotiate contracts with some of the unions, and I think some of the salary and wages could go to give the fire department, the police department, some of the other unions in this town that deserve a raise and haven't gotten one for years. We spent, I don't know how much money, I think it was, I heard rumors of up to $300,000 to negotiate these. This was outside counsel. If we have in-house counsel, why are we using outside counsel? Because of specializations. Mark doesn't have all the specializations, nothing against Mark on that point. It's just that there are specialized fields in law. I think if we did get outside counsel, we would probably be able to get this expertise, to negotiate the contracts, to do what Ellen Gethel needs, to do what zoning and planning needs, and to do what the selectmen needs. I'm sure that saving $150,000, it would also cut down on the lawsuits that this town does have. I think it was Portsmouth that said, their counsel said, our job is to work so that we don't have lawsuits. Wouldn't that be something in this town where you could go see the town lawyer and you wouldn't hear, I can't talk to you, go hire a lawyer? And that's why I would like to get outside counsel. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Guthrie. Anyone else wishing to be heard? Mr. DeMarco on the White Amendment. On the floor is an amendment proposed by Ms. White to reduce the operating budget by $136,174. Mr. DeMarco.
Victor Marco, I live in Milburn Avenue in Hampton. I'm also an elected member to the Budget Committee. I want to refer to, not everybody has this, but the Town of Hampton's expenditure report for the end of the fiscal year 2009. We're talking about the legal account, and this is the accountant's figure, the town's accountant's figure is, we expended $487,119 was the actual expenditure. Of that, $356,000 had to do with negotiations outside of our legal department. The total cost of our legal department to the town of Hampton is $130,263. $129,000 was used outside for collective bargaining negotiations. $119,000 was for damages and judgments against the town. So you're talking figures that are uncontrollable by the legal department. We have done two things in this town over the last 40 years of me being a resident, an employee, and an elected member. One was to hire the town accountant, a CPA, and the second was to hire our own legal counsel. He works under direction, as far as I understand, of the Board of Selectmen and the Planning Board and the four others. He gives legal opinions upon their request, and he formulates from that point on. He doesn't institute lawsuits. He follows the direction of the Board of Selectmen or other elected department heads. And I'm not in favor of this amendment. There's also I think a warrant article somewhere we're going to be addressing later on, addressing the same issue, if I'm correct, by the same person who just made this proposal. I would urge you to vote against this amendment and consider the expenditure portion of the budget. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. DeMarco. Mindful of the audio problems, I'm going to go back to Mr. Nichols. You want to be heard? If you could make sure you project out so that they can hear you.
I'd like to comment on Mr. Guthrie's comments related to
Move your mic up, Dick.
I'd like to comment on Mr. Guthrie's comments related to collective bargaining costs, because this has been a source of confusion. I think it has to do with the description and the line item in the expenditure report. If you look at 2009 and you look at the line, I don't know the exact number, but there's a line that reflects collective bargaining costs. This is not only collective bargaining, as in discussion, negotiations with unions on contracts, it also represents the costs associated with contractual disputes. I don't have an exact number in front of me. If Mark or Mike Schwartzer do, I would ask that they speak up. But in 2009, very little of that total was spent on contractual negotiations. That's all I have to say. Hopefully Mark or Fred or whatever have a specific number.
All right, thank you, Mr. Nichols. Seeing Mr. Schweitzer, the finance assistant, you have some numbers?
Right.
To pick up on the discussion of Mr. Nichols, in 2009, the collective bargaining labor cost line was $129,300. I don't have the exact figure, but since Mr. Welch this year was doing the negotiations, there were minimal charges, and I mean minimal charges dealing with contract negotiations. The majority of these dealt with other labor issues that came up during the year, and that was outside counsel on that portion.
Thank you, Mr. Schweitzer. Mr. Silverdeck.
Norman Silverdick, 70 Tide Mill Road. I'm opposed to the amendment, and I'll just use anecdotal evidence. I sit on the board of a company. We hired in Canada, we hired a labor attorney because we had 8 unions, and we found out by having in-house counsel, we were able to save at least $500,000 because we have continuous negotiations, issues dealing with grievances, etc. Found in-house counsel to be extremely cost-effective. We then just hired a general counsel to deal with other corporate matters, and we found, again, that avoiding outside counsel is saving us hundreds of thousands of dollars. Our in-house counsel will coordinate as much of the legal work as possible before using an outside counsel, and then able to control the cost of the outside counsel, because a lot of work has been done, and you reduce the duplication of effort, and you can expedite the process. And I believe, and Mr. Gerald made a presentation to the Budget Committee in its public session regarding the cost of in-house counsel at $94 an hour, and the fact that both he and his assistant worked very hard for the town's benefit. And I think that this kind of a decision is myopic, and I can't urge you all enough to defeat the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Silverdeck. We're going to take a brief pause here to allow the technicians to work on the audio, and then we'll move to Mr. Workman. Excuse me. Mr. Warburton.
Check. Bring it up, Brian. Go ahead. Check. 1, 1, 2. Slowly bring it up. Oh, that might be better. Check. Can everybody hear now? It still sounds a little echoey, boomy, huh? John, what do you... Check. Go ahead. Okay. Well, last night at 8 o'clock when you were all home watching TV, relaxing, it sounded beautiful in this auditorium, I have to tell you that. But with all the bodies in here, it does change it. Brian, bring it up just a touch more. Thank you. Too much. Yep. How's that? Anybody in the back hear us? Can you hear us? Sound better? I mean, we can't give you perfection. This isn't NBC, so, but, yeah, I know. Hey, Dick, could you try your mic? Yeah, just hand, clip it up on your... Take it on the whole article. Yeah, see, it's right about here. It's got to be on your shirt for us. It's got to wait. And Brian, bring that up. Number 2. Go ahead, Dick.
Yes?
Yeah, that just sounds like garbage.
How you doing, Brad?
Keep talking to me.
Test.
There we go. All right, let's give this a try. We'll work, as you continue the meeting, we'll try and make some adjustments.
Push that one back.
He's coming down here, but I'm trying to know what's going on, you know?
Thank you. All right, let's resume. Mr. Warburton.
Mr. Moderator, good to see you again. Brian Warburton, 24 Sanborn Road, Hampton. I have a couple questions and I have some comments. Can I ask through the moderator, through Town Manager Welch, who Mark Gerald works for?
Mr. Welch.
Mr. Moderator, the Town Council is hired by and reports to the Board of Selectmen.
When did that change?
That's what the law states. It's never been changed. That's the existing law.
In 2003, at a selectmen's meeting, the then town manager, James Barrington, announced that, quote, he had hired a town attorney in the name of Mark Gerald. I was on the board at the time.
I suspect he was either authorized, he had to be authorized by the board to do that.
I was on the board and we had an announcement made at the meeting. Once again, we have some confusion, Mr. Moderator, so for the public at home and the public here today, we now have been told that Mr. Gerald works for the selectmen. Is that correct?
That's the response you've been given, but the White Amendment is to reduce the budget by a sum certain. So there may be historical issues that you would like to take up with the manager of the board, but I'd like you to focus your remarks on whether we should reduce this budget by the amount proposed by June White.
I think one of the issues that the reason why this has been brought forward today and in recent months is due to the fact, number one, that the legal department budget has not only quadrupled, and I find it interesting that the selectmen who tell us every week how much money they're saving the taxpayers, and then we turn around and see how many departments that are in the budget that have quadrupled, and we don't tell the public why. For many years, and I think Mrs. Woolsey probably talked about this earlier, I just got here a few minutes ago, for many years we had outside counsel, and outside counsel was called in on those specific issues that warranted legal advice. Now, I'm not an attorney, and nor do I claim to be, but for 9 years on the Board of Selectmen, we had some very good legal advice, and the costs were extremely different than what it is now. And I think the other problem I'm having, and let me start off by using my good friend Fred Rice's expression, this is not personal, it's business. But I find it really hard that sitting home when we have people unemployed in this community, people losing their jobs, and we have our town attorney going on public TV saying that he works 35 hours a week and he gets paid almost $100,000 a year. I have a real problem with that. And let me tell you something else. There's a lot of us who are on salary who work many hours to get the job done. My friend Mr. DeMarco in the Budget Committee made some comments a couple months ago which got me stirred up, and his comment was, Mr. Gerald has done an excellent job. I want somebody to tell me, first of all, what an excellent job is. Now I'm going to address Mrs. White's motion. I think the community is frustrated with this and that, and we get told one thing and we do another. I certainly know from firsthand experience that this community is a very large community and one that needs constant legal advice. But I also know that we've heard from at least 3 of the selectmen, although they don't seem to be talking today, that we want to save the taxpayers, and we know what's best for the taxpayers, and we know what's good, and nobody else knows anything, by the way, even including former selectmen, I guess. If that's the case, I think we have a right to open up this discussion about, do we want to go back to what was tradition? And that tradition was to have outside counsel when it's needed. And what I find interesting, Mr. Moderator, somebody asked me yesterday, they said, well, why would you want to have outside counsel when you have somebody in-house? I think people get complacent. I think we get caught up in this whole thing of 9 to 5, and cases go on and on and on and on and on. Mr. Nichols, rightfully so, has talked about different things in the budget through the years and explained to the taxpayers where we're saving money and where it's costing us money. I'd like to see some discussion today led by Mr. Griffin and the rest of the Board of Selectmen on why they feel that we should keep this position, the position of town attorney itself versus going outside. Because I have to tell you, if I look at the consecutive budgets for the last 10 years, look at the cost of the legal department. And I'll add one more thing before the rest of the public speaks. We are a community now that is a sad community. And I say that because the Board of Selectmen talks about the unions. How many times you turn on 22? The unions. Our employees, and I say it every year and I'm going to say it again, they are our best asset. And we sit here and we're paying a town attorney $100,000, but we have no contracts for 6 years. And I hear comments like overtime. We're paying people too much. These are people who live in this community. Wake up, smell the roses, and let's go back to making this town a happy town. It isn't. And your employees aren't happy. And if you're proud of that, then keep running for office. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Warburton. Mr. Griffin.
I'd like to bring up a couple of points here. One of the figures that are being mentioned today are about the amounts that have been settled in lawsuits. Most of it, I see there's several former selectmen sitting in this room. These lawsuits that have been settled this year have been in the works for years. And this is going back to, I think that we've brought a lot of these issues to an end, and it was time. I think not only Mark Gerald, but the other people that we ended up having to hire helped bring these lawsuits to a reasonable conclusion that worked for the town of Hampton. I also feel that I myself am lawyer phobic. I always have been. At every time I get an opportunity to contribute to doing less legal-wise, I do. But there are just so many things. There are so many lawsuits that are filed against the town, some of them frivolous, some of them have meaning. I think it's important to mention that the same woman making this amendment is involved in a lawsuit right now with the town where she sued the town. And as far as the unions are concerned, we have had to, there are legal costs because we want to make sure that everyone's right is protected. And we're doing the very best we can to keep the costs down for the citizens of Hampton at every turn. And I think this Board of Selectmen has worked very hard for that. And so as far as I'm concerned, I'm definitely against this amendment. I think it has little merit. Thank you.
Mrs. Zenoy, then Mr. Lally.
Yes, am I heard out there or not? I don't know. I'm against this amendment as proposed by Mrs. White as well. I've been on the board about a year, and I have found that Mr. Gerald is very detailed-orientated, very conscientious, very articulate in articulating to us these lawsuits that are coming at us. We had one that we're not even finished yet, and it started last summer at the beach on the boardwalk. And he listens to us, and he doesn't move forward unless we say to move forward on these lawsuits. He works 45 hours a week. His contract, I believe, calls for 35 hours of work. He's there at least 45 hours. The in-house cost to run the office that he's in, his legal costs, are about $95 an hour. We go outside, we're going to spend $200, $300, $400 an hour. We're into a lot of environmental issues. We had 2 lawsuits that we settled in 2009. One was absolutely environmental. Another one was Hannaford. That falls into the budget cost that bumped his 2009 actuals up by $119,000. The settlement of those 2 disputes that went on for years. as Mr. Griffin says, many of these lawsuits are compilation. They've been on our plate since 2005, 6, 7. We're trying to resolve them. So I'm absolutely in favor of maintaining our town attorney in the office. I think if we go outside, we are going to spend big money, because these are not simple and easy suits. He's tied up a great deal with suits brought by the unions for sick bank and other things. So I'm absolutely in favor of maintaining the office. And we are indeed watching every suit that comes our way. We're not just rubber stamping. And we're pushing back in many cases and getting answers. That's kind of my position on it. I think that we have a bargain right now. And this year here, 2009, was somewhat of an anomaly. As I said, 119K fell into the budget this year because we settled two lawsuits. It also includes input from environmental people and lawyers and labor specialists. So, again, as I said at the Budget Committee meeting, we're going to be very penny-wise, pound-foolish if we adopt what Mrs. White has suggested. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Zanoy. Mr. Lally.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. When I first heard that there was going to be discussion a few months ago in a possible warrant article to dissolve, if you will, the town attorney's office, we started doing some homework on it. Maybe, hey, listen, you know, people sometimes have an idea that comes, you haven't thought, maybe it's something we should look at. To speak to the White Amendment, though, at this point, we've heard people get up on the floor and talk about litigation, the town. And I also heard a comment the other day that if we didn't have the town attorney, it seems like he seeks out things to do. He seeks out lawsuits and so forth, litigation. Going back to 2003, Mr. Moderator, the number of cases that were brought against the town were 15. Cases the town filed was 2. In 2004, the number was 13 against the town, brought against the town. We filed 2. In 2005, 20 lawsuits were brought against the town of Hampton. The town of Hampton had 1. 2006, 11 brought against. We had 2. 2007, 21 cases were brought against the town of Hampton. We filed 2. 2008, 14 cases. We filed 7. Last year, 27 lawsuits were brought against the town of Hampton. Mr. Gerald filed 7 on behalf of certain boards in town. Some of these cases, one of the ones I think of recently was an environmental case having to do with the Taylor River Dam. These are specific cases that are quality of life issues for people in Hampton. We had to go out and hire an attorney for this case. As far as union cases go, there's 6 unions in town. I'd like nothing better than to have all those settled. But unfortunately, as you know, that's not the case. That's why they call it negotiation. If the unions accepted all our conditions tomorrow, these cases would be settled tomorrow. If we accepted all the union's conditions tomorrow, these cases would be settled tomorrow. We all know it doesn't work that way. Mr. Warburton said, he had a phrase that said, it's not personal, it's business. He couldn't be more wrong. This is all about personal, folks. It's all about personal. Read what's going on here. Look at what's happened in some of these things. You'll know this is personal. It's not right. Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Mr. Lally. Do I have somebody from the public? Ms. Kepner?
Thank you, Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Susan Kepner, 105 Mill Road. I guess I'm going to ask a question that I, excuse me, haven't heard anyone ask yet, about why there's so many more court cases. Do we have the town council, and because we do, that's drawing the court cases? Or are there just more court cases because there are rules and regulations in the town that people who live in work in the town are finding difficult to comply with. So I would raise that question, why are there so many court cases? And is there a way that the selectmen, the zoning board, the planning boards, because I understand a lot of these cases are land use cases, is there a way to be negotiating without necessarily having a lawyer involved? Are we sitting down at the table with these people? Are they are fully aware of all the regulations that the town supports and has to comply with? Are we doing the due diligence first before we bring this to court? And when someone does threaten us with a lawsuit, are we sitting down with them and saying, how can we work this out without involving legal counsel? How can we come to a good discourse through discussion? How can we come to an agreement, excuse me, that shows cooperation between the town and the other person, an understanding, and just preventing us from even getting to the point of needing the legal issue and the legal case to begin with?
Thank you, Ms. Kepner. Does anyone on the board, Mr. Bateman, and anybody on the board want to address Ms. Kepner's question? Mr. Zinoy?
Yeah, I'd like to respond to that a little bit. For instance, in 2009, we had a total number of new cases of 27. 11 of those were tax abatement cases, assessments that took place in 2008, taxes levied in 2009, 11 tax abatement cases that Mr. Gerald had to participate in out of the 27 new cases in 2009.
Thank you, Mrs. Zinoy.
I'd like to say something, too.
Yes.
I would just like to say that part of me being lawyer phobic is that I've always said to people, why don't you come in and bring your issue to the zoning board, bring your issue to the planning board. So many people would rather hire a lawyer than do that. And to me, it's just a simple waste of money, because anyone that brings their concerns, people do try to sit down and work them out. The best thing you can do is go to the planning or the zoning board and go by yourself. You don't always need a lawyer. There are some issues that are different, but not enough people want to just go out. Some people are afraid to talk, so the first thing they do is call a lawyer. Well, it's not always necessary, and that's one of the nice things about being in this type of town government, is you can go and bring up many issues and resolve them yourself easier, but many people find it that they have to hire a lawyer because they don't want to be seen in public, they don't want to talk about it or whatever, they're afraid they'll make a mistake, but not enough people come forward and try to work these issues out. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Griffin. What we're going to do is we're going to hear from Ms. Latimer. We've got some people in line right to Mr. Webb. I know Mr. Schweitzer wants to provide some statistical information. We've had a request, 5 signatures for a secret ballot, so that is likely in our future. So after we go through to Mr. Webb, I'm going to call for a sense of this body to see if we're ready to have that secret yes-no ballot. Ms. Latimer.
Thank you. Eileen Latimer, 251 Mill Road. Is this any better? We're having a really hard time out here hearing. Want me to back up? Okay, but let me know if you can't hear me, because usually you can't. Something that troubles me about this, and I'm speaking in favor of the amendment, by the way, is that we have now created an entire department that is legal counsel and his assistant, and all the items that Ms. White mentioned that go along with this department, including money for travel, money for education. And what troubles me the most is that the voters have not ever had the opportunity to vote for anything that has created or been put into this department. That will probably be my biggest thorn in the side, that it was created by actually a former town manager, and we went along and an assistant was hired, and we didn't hire a trained assistant, we hired one that we then had to spend money to teach. So I guess I'm painting the picture that this is kind of a department that's growing all by itself without any input whatsoever from the voters in this town. And quite honestly, if I could stand here and say to you, as I have on other issues, gentlemen, the voters voted for it, live with it, I'd be happy to do that. But they have not. And we have not saved money. We're spending 5 times what we were just a few years ago. 5 times the amount. Will people stop litigating? No. It's the world that we live in. But we have a disproportionate amount of litigation. Is that because we do have a town council? Is it blowing up in our face and going against us? And finally, maybe not finally, we are selective in who town council, and I say town council, represents. Because being on the budget committee for the past 9 years, we have had times when we have had to ask for a legal opinion, usually on the way warrant articles are written or on things that are put before us that we're not sure if the legal wording is correct. And we have not been able to get benefit of that counsel. And I stand there wondering why the planning board can get it. Ellen Goethel said, praised you for being able to do that too and service environmental issues. And yet one of the most important committees in this town, the budget committee, of whose budget we're looking at right now, has no access, and we're told to go to the outside. Well, I want everybody to understand what that means. If you pay attention to all the line articles on the budget, look at the budget committee and look at what we have for a budget. I'll tell you what we spend money on. A secretary and 2 copies of a municipal publication that if the other 13 members, or actually if the 15 members want a personal copy, they can pay for themselves. So I would think if this is a true municipal position and department, that we should have equal access to it or rethink where we are. Do we need to support a department in its entirety when you have no control over that department? You haven't from day one since we hired council. You didn't when you got an assistant, and God knows how difficult it is in this town to put in one more position and then to train that position and put all the things that go with it into this department. For these reasons, I would ask you to vote against this. You won't go without legal counsel. You'll still go back to a former way of doing it. Vote for the amendment, okay? For the amendment, to clear that. Vote for the amendment. And as I'm saying, you won't go back. You won't lose legal counsel. You'll still have it. And on any given day, I suppose what we expend will be relative to the lawsuits we have. But I would like to be able to sit down also and watch a board of selectmen capable of thinking on their own and making decisions without having every other line refer to legal counsel. We're creating our own messes sometimes, and I think this might be one avenue of going back and resetting the clock. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Latimer. Mr. Scanlon.
Hi, Mike Scanlon. I haven't talked in 2 years. This is the most exciting form of government left in this country. It's the purest form of democracy, and anybody who takes the time to come out and voice their opinion in this form of democracy, it's one voice and one vote. There's nothing else like it anywhere in the country, and we have to remember that because everybody has the right to speak, everybody has the right to address their representatives, ask questions. I'm going to take a short trip down 6 years of the time that...
No, we're not going to do that. We're going to talk about the White Amendment, which is $136,000. Are you in favor or are you opposed? We've batted this around for a while, so please, to the White Amendment.
I might have to ask that you step down, and I'd like to see an assistant moderator step up.
Now, I'd like you to speak to the amendment, sir.
In 2003, I had to file a motion for rehearing with 6 abutters on a case that affected property rights in the town of Hampton. What is not, the underlying problem here, what is not being said, is it's property right issues that are affecting the number of lawsuits and the caseloads of these lawsuits. In that time frame, I believe the McEachern Law Firm was the outside counsel for the town of Hampton. And in January of that year, I got a letter from the new town attorney at the time, Mark Gerald, stating more or less that he advised me that I should seek counsel. And we were in the process of a rehearing on a zoning case at that time. Make a long story short, it took 2 years for the planning board to approve this particular project. It doesn't matter which one it is. It's just one case of many. And to make a long story short, we had to go to Superior Court, and there was, on page 84 and 85 of that particular Superior Court lawsuit, there was a statement that was made about how deed restrictions were lifted in our town. And there was a subterfuge involving 41A14-2 and the fact that the deed restrictions we were specifically talking about were only lifted by this legislative body. And there is a mistake that constantly is made that we are the legislative body. We are the governing body. We are the voice. It is our vote. We decide if the budget passes or fails. What we've looked at in the past 6 years is a charter form of government with the town council basically having non-public meetings, usually almost after every single selectmen's meeting, to discuss events. It's either before or after. Now, I know for a fact that the requests I've made by email for 91A rights for information have never been answered, ever. So I can tell you without a doubt, okay, and I'm trying not to have this be personal, but without a doubt, the reason why this amendment is being made, and I have no involvement with this amendment, and I have no involvement with the other article, but I'm one person that was involved with 6 other abutters that were protecting property rights, okay? And granted, the process is usually through zoning or planning, and after exhausting rehearings, after exhausting all other remedy, the only recourse is Superior Court. So the bottom line is you've got 48 lawsuits. My guarantee is 80% of them are zoning or planning issues, and the issue still is, to get to Supreme Court, you're going to look at easily $40,000 or $50,000 as an abutter fighting the town of Hampton, all right? And the callousness of somebody to say to somebody's opposing counsel, well, your client is the reason why I'll never lose my job, or words to that effect, okay? There's a callousness. I'm sure the advice is, don't worry, these are nuisance lawsuits, we'll take care of it. Well, you know something? The people that are fighting for their property rights. They're fighting to be allowed to be business people or even citizens to keep their homes. I may have lost my case, but the building was never built, and my worry was, in the type of economy we had, that it not sit with steel rotting like a project in Manchester sat for 15 years unfinished. And that would have been 85 feet in height, which was 35 feet higher than the existing zoning ordinance. And going back again, and again, it's very, very interesting that I was stopped immediately. In 2003, actually 2004, because it was the time frame, March, there were 4 or 5 amendments or articles that were presented, and immediately 3 of them that I had I was told they were illegal, all right? And I had to fight to have them be non-binding. Well, to this day, I'm still not convinced that it was right to call something non-binding and advisory. And, I may have my issues, and I have a recourse. I have a recourse through the Attorney General's office. I have a recourse through the bar of the state of New Hampshire. But this might just be time to look at a contract. And I have one question that actually involves 2 things that have occurred. Number one, why is it that no one knows the length of the contract of this particular individual's position? Has it been approved more than once? And why is it that his assistant, after being voted down at town meeting to have funding provided for law school, why is it that that position also was funded by town funds? These are the things that people don't miss. These are the things that have people upset. And the bottom line is when people sue their town, it's because they have no other recourse. And if, in fact, everyone took the time to do the jobs correctly, there might not be the need for in-house counsel. And despite what anyone might think, in-house counsel, is one option. But I tell you, this is the closest thing to a charter government we've seen in 6 years, and it's the reason why it should be disapproved. And I think it's a good opportunity right now to think seriously about eliminating in-house counsel and paying a referral to competent counsel, because there are plenty of competent counsels out there. And if and when it's time for a review of an existing contract, that you think seriously about looking at other options, because I'm not for or against this, despite my personal feeling. But I truly think that it's too easy to take a one-page memorandum and call it legal advice, when with competent outside counsel, you might get a very thorough briefing as to why something may or may not be legal. So I just think it's very easy to take that advice as being the correct advice, because it may not be. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, Mr. Scanlon. Mr. Gaethel.
Good morning. David Gaethel, 23 Ridgeview Terrace. I'd like to speak in opposition to this amendment, and I'm going to tell you several reasons why. First of all, I think it's the ultimate penny-wise and pound-foolish idea that I've heard in a long time. I'm a commercial fisherman. I deal with the National Marine Fisheries Service. I have a little bit of knowledge about lawsuits because they are the most heavily sued government agency in America. So I've been on both sides as helping them defend against suits and suing them. And I can tell you a little bit about trying to bring legal counsel up to speed. Every time you hire a lawyer as outside counsel, you're going to spend $40, $50, maybe $60, $100,000 just to bring them up to speed on what it is that the issue is. When you have an in-house counsel, the in-house counsel already has an idea of what the issues are. He already has a good knowledge of the statutes that apply to this particular case. So you're saving money right there, right up front. And so the second issue is the fact that a number of the issues that town council is dealing with today had their origins in the way we did business 30, 40, 50 years ago, even longer sometimes. The reason was that we didn't have counsel, and a lot of people would just give it a handshake and a nod and say, well, okay, that must be good enough. And the fact was, a lot of times things weren't done so-called legally. And we are still dealing with those issues like hangovers today. And I'm hoping, if I'm here 30 years from now, which I probably won't be, but if I am, that those types of issues will not be coming before this board, that we won't be dealing with encroachments on town land, things of those nature that have occurred in the past because somebody didn't want to spend the money to make sure that things were laid out accurately. So again, I would urge you to vote this down. I think your legal budget will skyrocket if you have to seek outside counsel on every issue. Remember, you have a number of volunteer boards here in town. They have the right to counsel, and a lot of times they need it. And if they all start seeking it, and they all start putting it in their budgets so that they can run these boards, the zoning board, the planning board, the conservation commission, and a host of others, the amount of money you'll be spending will make this look very insignificant, truly. So I can't, again, urge you strongly enough to deal with the business side of this. I know there are personal issues involved in this. This is a small town. We all know who's doing what to everybody. It's just like fishing. I know everything that everybody's doing. I'm in the information business. And, I guarantee you there's an element of personal bias here in this whole discussion. So if you're here strictly to save money, and that's basically why I come, it's my wallet. My wallet says I'm better off with town council. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gaethel. Mr. Schweitzer.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I prepared this chart. This is basically the funds that are spent against the budgets.
Are we in the way?
I prepared this chart, and these are the dollars that have been spent for the last 4 years against the legal department. You have the top section, which is actually the office, which is what we're talking about with the amendment. And then the second part is the legal expenses that deal with the outside counsel, et cetera. I really want to point out that last figure in that line, the $356,000. That includes the $119,000 that everyone's been talking about. Those dollars, by accounting principles, I had to book it here to an expense account. That's why this looks so high. We actually have that money reserved in the designated fund balance, and at the end of the year, when the audit is completed, that amount of money will be taken out of that reserve. It has to be booked this way, but this really isn't going to be the net effect that you're going to have when you do get to the final end of the year. That was point one. Point two, I work very closely with Mr. Gerald. He's across the hall from me. And if he wasn't there, I'd have to pick up the phone and call outside counsel. They start the clock when I call. They cost me $225 an hour. One call, minimum 15 minutes, that's $50. I consider every dollar that goes through our budgeting system my money because it's your money. I hate calling lawyers. I really don't want to see the $50 bills come flowing through. Mr. Gerald gives me an opportunity to get some reasonable, easy questions taken care of, basically instantaneously. I've also had experience with outside counsel in another life. I'm also the planning chairman over in Kensington. When you want to talk to outside counsel, you send email. And then you get an email back maybe in a couple weeks. And then, well, that's not really didn't cover the situation, so you have to send out more information, et cetera. But the clock is running every time you do this. Lastly, Mr. Gerald is budgeted for 37 hours. He doesn't work that. He works 45 plus. I find him there on the weekends when I show up. I see him there at night. He's giving you one of the best deals I can think of in regards to your dollar per hour. It comes out to about 97, and that's totally loaded. He doesn't get that money. He only gets his normal salary. But he puts his time in, and I think this town gets one great benefit out of it. And I would be very, very sorry to see this amendment passed because you'd be taking one of my tools away that I use basically every day. Thank you.
Mr. Bateman?
Waiting on Article 36. We're kind of splitting our time here. Article 36 is basically this amendment. At least we can get both of them over at once.
Working on the White Amendment to Article 8.
In the year 2003, there were 15 new cases, suits, brought against the town of Hampton. In 2004, there were 13 suits. In 2005, 20. 2006, 11. In 2007, 21. 2008, 14. 2009, 27. Out of the 27 in 2009, 11 of those are tax abatement cases. People are looking at having their homes revalued. When you go down looking at it, you remove the 11 which were caused because of the tax situation. That's basically a 16 suit year. It stays pretty steady. These are individuals coming after the town of Hampton. This is not, there's a whole different count for those times that we, the selectmen, direct the employee to file suit on our behalf to collect our money to solve our problems. It stays pretty steady, and you need to think of several things. Everybody says that they've talked with personnel and town attorneys, city attorneys. Gee, that's interesting. You're using the fact that you can talk to that person who is an in-house attorney to get rid of an in-house attorney. I think that's a little different. No matter what, people are going to come to the town of Hampton looking to sue. We cannot stop that. That's their right. We have an extreme need to defend ourselves. In-house counsel has represented over years, has proven to be basically a good financial move for us. I believe that the amendment itself is ill-conceived. It is short-sighted. You're not going to save money. You're going to spend more. And I find it humorous that it is authored by an individual who was in litigation with the town. Yeah, I think it's personal. I think that this amendment is personal. I believe Article 36 is personal. I hope that both are voted down.
Thank you, Mr. Bateman. Mr. Gerald, do you wish to be heard before I go to Mr. Webb?
Yes, I want to thank the townspeople of this town for allowing me to be of service for the last 7 years. It's been an honor and a privilege. I would like to say that the town of Hampton, I think, is unique in this state. We have 15,000 year-round residents, but in the summer, as we know, it grows to over 100,000 residents. And with that come problems that are unique to a community that therefore translates into needing more police, more fire, and indeed also more legal representation. It is certainly the case that for a two-person department, both of whom are attorneys, this department runs at the rate of $95 an hour, whereas outside counsel, as Mr. Schweitzer has indicated, is more than twice that. The selectmen have recognized that the more hours of work that the in-house legal department performs instead of outside counsel, the greater the savings to Hampton taxpayers. And therefore, on the chart that was up on the board you see here, litigations that was just there, very few cases are actually brought by the legal department, or to the right you see the number handled by outside counsel under each category. Very few are actually brought by the legal department or by outside counsel. But in the last 2 years, a number of matters have arisen that make it much more cost-effective to have in-house counsel handle these, if possible, than out-of-house counsel. And just by way of examples, there are matters pertaining to, that have been brought, pertaining to unpaid land rent, matters pertaining to contract interpretation, that can be performed in court where we are frequently appearing, that can comfortably be handled by the in-house legal department, thereby saving the use of outside counsel, which would be more than twice the cost. It is certainly the case that the number of hours required to do this job are much more than the 35 hours that are paid, and I'm happy to do them. Not looking for a raise, haven't looked for a raise, and the town attorney's salary has remained constant at about $89,000 for the last few years for someone who's been in practice for 30 years plus now. So I'm happy to do the job. Obviously, it's something that is contentious at times, but I firmly believe that doing town municipal work is something where you can make a difference. The job is something that I feel strongly about, and whether it's me in the job or someone else, I think an in-house attorney is very important to the town. You have access for your department heads that you would not get from an outside person, and I've tried to do the job on the outside. And when you're on the inside, you get to head off suits before they happen. A lot of the cases that are brought against the town are in the land use area, and there's a very short window of time, 30 days after a decision is made by a planning board or after the Board of Adjustment's final decision, 30 days within which to file suit. There's not time, unfortunately, in response to Representative Kepner's suggestion, to work things out within those 30 days. The person who wishes to sue basically needs to get counsel and act right away. And therefore, the town has to defend against that, or else say to its planning board and its zoning board of adjustment, we're not going to defend your decisions. Those boards work very hard as volunteers to listen to what's presented to them and to come up with important decisions that are worth defending. I would like to note that given the number of hours that are required to do this job right, I have found it's important to build in extra capacity in the department without adding another full-time person. And so we have done that over time. And having another person who is trained in the law, I think has added tremendous capacity in-house to the department at very little cost to deal with the range of issues that are tremendous and complex in Hampton. It's something where that if the town did not have an in-house legal department, it would cost close to $500,000 to pay outside attorneys to do the work done by the legal department. And believe me, the work needs to be done, and if it wasn't done, you'd be going to outside counsel in-house. You'd be going more to out-of-house counsel to mop up the mess. And maybe I said it right the first time. There's a slide of the comparative cost for the hours actually worked, which are 45 hours plus. If you were to hire outside counsel at the average rate of $210 per hour rather than $95 that are paid in-house at a fixed cost, you would get close to $500,000. So I appreciate the chance to speak, and I appreciate the comments of others. In a way, I'm glad that the issue has been brought up because I do believe it's important to know what you're getting and the importance of in-house counsel. Obviously, there are a lot of times where the discussions with the selectmen over the handling of litigation can't be done in a public setting because you're talking litigation strategy. That's what that's used for. The selectmen are the ones who decide what strategy should be used in litigation, whether to pursue cases or not to pursue cases, and it's important to be able to speak with them. Obviously, you can't do those effectively. So I thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Gerald. Mr. Webb, and then a sense of the meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Good morning, selectmen, public. How did we end up with a town attorney? My wife and I had a nice conversation with a fellow by the name of Jim Workman. We explained what Greenwich, Connecticut had as an attorney. Jim Workman took the ball. He did the research and found out that there was a large savings. But where is that savings? Tonight, most of your discussion has been that savings related to outside court cases. There is a tremendous amount of savings that we were not getting using outside outside lawyers. Where are those? The attorney doesn't only give service to the selectmen, he gives service to the town manager, to the town department heads. He looks through what the town has in the way of ordinances, in the way of regulations, and he says, are these legal or are they not legal? That alone takes a tremendous amount of time to continually go over all of the regulations, ordinances, and rules of the town. So I am against this totally. I would like to bring out the fact that and I'm going to refer to the Article 36. I'd like my comments referred to that article so I don't have to speak again.
You're going to need to save those, Mr. Webb. We are speaking only on the White amendment to Article 8, please. The amendment to reduce the budget by $136,174.
Okay, I will still refer to a figure in the amendment, figure adding cost of lost court cases. Those court cases were liable to have been lost anyway. So I asked you to subtract that figure from the figure that they're using as an argument as far as cost is concerned and expense of the law department. I urge you to keep the town lawyer. He gives us a good benefit. He does things that wouldn't be done otherwise if he used outside counsel. I thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Webb. All those in favor of cutting off discussion at this time and moving to the ballot question, raise your hands. Down hands. Any opposed? All right. I have presented to me a petition signed by 5 voters who I see here in the hall to have a secret ballot on the White amendment. The White amendment, if you're voting in favor, if you're voting yes, you are voting to reduce the operating budget by $136,174. A vote in favor is a vote to reduce the budget by $136,174. A vote in the negative is a vote to keep the budget at its stated figure. We will proceed as custom down to the front of the room. Not yet, not yet. Make sure you bring your card with you. You must be checked in. If you're going to vote, you must be a registered voter. You must have checked in. You must have your red voter card. Your voter card will be stamped. You will then be given a ballot. Fill out the ballot and give it to the ballot clerks. Place it in the voting machine. And we will resume after it's become clear that all the voters have participated. Thank you.
That's apropos, maybe. By the time today, you go the way you're
I don't think it'll pass. Look who's here. Thank you. Okay. What's for you, Nick? Very good, sir. And you?
many of these sessions over 45 years. So this is better.
Okay. Thank you. All this does is cut the budget. It doesn't do anything. Stupid.
Oh, I know. And you know what? I didn't think a lot of conservatives bad last year. Maybe it's a mix of both. There you go. There you go. It doesn't feel a little warm, although chemically it doesn't, but... The opposite. Absolutely.
If you haven't voted, please do so. I am going to proceed to close the voting. So if you have not voted, you need to go right to the checklist.
Yeah. 501. That's your safety plan. Thank you.
I think use a taser.
Just stop it. I'm not in the kidding mode. I'm in the serious mode here.
That's why they call it.
Vision of what we want. I hate these chairs. Future. Yeah. We can come up with a list of we get a vision. You know. But I mean, that may be right. But they're gonna get another presentation to the selection, so to get the value.
I got somebody working
What they
there.
decide on, and they're looking for us
I
to
wasn't
like a wish
planning
list.
on being here this morning.
That maybe we could say, well, this is where they can help us with this stuff, you know? Yeah.
Huh?
What do you want? Right.
Maybe you and I should get together.
I think that
Public getting
right, yeah. She was still talking. I didn't go to
Sending them through Obama.
Yeah, please be.
Yeah. Yes.
Said it's not personal, this is business.
I get their hands slapped.
Sitting over there laughing at his hair while he's
Yeah, I know exactly how you feel.
So they were worried about bad feelings and stuff.
Although I didn't vote
I got no
for it.
bad feelings, you know? And that's in the past, and
My problem was he makes a hell of a good speech. Isn't doing it.
No, Fred, I'm first and foremost, I'm looking for cooperation.
like they said too, you know?
Yeah.
I don't know.
They're really not in the master plan business.
I am.
Feed up the citizens.
I think that message has been given by Massachusetts.
Prices have to change. Oh, yeah, for the last couple of months. Just developers going down, seeing price, and,
Terrible, all right. It's crazy.
Absolutely
No.
And then,
Yep, that's it.
You know, or not
Red
getting
Bull yelling, he doesn't get stuff done on time.
Want to save money, we could save $160,000 a week just on putting people in the house back above California. And that's just the fuel. Could the plane or could it?
I told him, I said, you gotta make sure that Hampton comes first. Regional stuff, because a lot of times you see county stuff. So I've been a bumper in the last 2 months. Let's go, Bob. It's been a nerve down. And Michael Green jumped on the other day from Sherburne Place, you know, to prove it, because James says we don't have it back in the CPW on the phone.
back to zone.
I think it's easier.
You don't know.
It's just that. If it flies, I'm gonna request no parking outside of the bank. Oh, yeah, right. You know, you come out of that, they park cars all the way out to the telephone pole, and you can't see past the car until you're in the lane. Right.
Plus, I come out of the bank with the cars parked out front.
Yeah.
Come out of there and kind of creep out.
We had to send a letter to CVS too, telling them don't park snow on their property.
How about the operating?
Trying to get the gate open.
Highway resurfaces, they put 10 down to 40. 135 to 40.
Also, it has to be in shape. Because that's the way something
No, I don't think the town wants it. They claim that our way was a really good road. Because the tractor trailers off at Tide Mill. He's the shit out of it. got Brazonics down there, and there's a whole bunch of other glass companies.
Store one of those.
That's funny, the vote order on the planning board. The newcomer gets last anyway. Is he?
One.
Oh, yeah, no.
I'd like to Everybody gets up.
What you do is
Yeah, but I made up the words.
Yeah. Not marked. But his permit expires every first. Yeah. That's what it says.
Usually they try and keep those away from the base players.
Exactly. That's all I do.
What do you make them run?
I don't know if they.
Rayanne's coming up. Make sure you get it. She's gonna let the people know ahead of time so they can get the letter. The lady down there is expired.
I've never heard a bad thing about it.
We gotta have it 30 days.
Oh, no kidding. Right.
They had a group there.
Opening up the gate.
How often?
So do you want to make the amendment?
Yes. Yep.
If everyone could take their seats, please, and we'll resume.
Yeah. Now, where's the sea glass? The other side?
It's right on the ocean. You ought to go there. Strictly to see what, that's what we should have.
Is it what used to be?
No, it used to be the out on the water.
If you're going down that little strip facing the water, is it to the right or left?
In the amendment, the handwritten.
So it's in between.
Yeah.
Little sign with it.
It's right on the water. In fact, the building.
We will resume the meeting. We had recessed for a yes/no secret ballot vote on the White amendment. The amendment was to reduce the operating budget by $136,174. The results of the tally were 68 in favor, 70 opposed. We have recounted those ballots by hand due to the closeness shown by the voting machine, and the hand count was identical to the tally on the voting machine. So the White amendment has been defeated, 68 to 70. We are back on the budget in the figure originally presented this morning. Is there anyone else who would like to speak to the budget? Mr. Gopalin.
Moderator, I would like to propose an amendment to Article number 8.
Can't hear you. Not what both microphones are. So get in the middle. Get in the middle.
Mr. Moderator, can you hear us now? Can you hear me now? Yeah. I would like to propose an amendment to Article 8, the bottom line figure, and I'd like to do that right now.
Well, if you could announce your amendment and you need a second, why don't you tell the body what you are proposing?
What I'm proposing is the bottom line figure, 24,364,484 be amended to.
Mr. Gopal, could you, okay, go ahead, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
To 24,681,058, which is an increase. And it is uncharacteristic of me to propose an increase. And the reason why I'm doing this is because...
Mr. Gopal, let me just get see if we can get a second to your motion to amend, seconded by Mr. Pierce. And if you could isolate the amount just for before you begin. So Mr. Gopalan is moving to amend the budget to a new figure of $24,681,058, and the motion to amend has been seconded by Mr. Pierce. Mr. Gopalan, please speak to the amendment.
Thank you. The budget as was presented and eloquently advocated for the chairman of the Budget Committee is, in my opinion, flawed. The reason why it is flawed is because the highway and streets, which are also vital, have been reduced by a figure of $316,574 in order to make the numbers come out differently on the total budget. To me, that's cutting the work scope to make the budget right is not the way to do it. We need work on the road maintenance. And you all know that the roads are not in excellent shape in order for us to say we don't need it now, we can postpone it. I can speak to this somewhat personally because I do walk the street as an exercise every day. And I see potholes and I see cracks and I see rather poor conditions of the road. I've also experienced in the past coming out of the library, cracked windshield. Of course, that has been remedied now. But what this budget does is simply take away that money so that less road repair can be made to have better roads. You couple that with the fact that there is a compact with the state to maintain some of the state roads within the boundaries of Hampton. All those are not being done because of the cost. And so the roads are just as important as fire, as police. Although I use the roads, and many of you do every day, fire and police, I hope I don't need to call them. I'm glad they are there. So it is not a contest between one versus the other. Therefore, I say my amendment puts that back so that we can get on with the road. The other aspect of this maintenance cutback is there are a number of houses that are flooded, but you see that particularly walking towards the beach. Every time there is a rainfall, there is flooded out streets. You can't walk on them. You can hardly drive by them, particularly if you walk towards the beach on High Street. You see that every season in, season out. And what this will do is eliminate or curtail the necessary repairs that we need to make to keep the streets dry. What that does is it encourages traffic accidents, encourages automobile mishaps, and generally contribute to unsafe conditions on the road. And on top of that, if you do not address the flooded conditions, keep in mind our town is located on the seacoast, which means the sea level issue relating to flooding is crucial. And if we don't solve that, or if you don't keep on top of it, the house basements may have to be needlessly flooded. So for all those reasons, I think that we cannot simply cut work scope so that we can get an attractive number on the budget. It's like saying I'm going to reduce weight by amputating my leg. So this is something that we need to do, and therefore, as I said, it is uncharacteristic of me. I would rather have a better operating condition than cutting out the work scope. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gopalan. Next, I'm going to go to Mr. Pierce. Mr. Webb, I know you haven't spoken on this amendment, but you have spoken to the budget, and I don't believe Mr. Pierce has spoken to the budget yet.
Good morning, still. Have a feeling we're going to be here for a while. Mike Pierce, 16 Hedman Avenue. Contrary to what Mary Louise Woolsey told you a while back when I wanted to rebut it quickly, not everything is exactly the way she sees it. Unfortunately, she is not the GOD of the money in Hampton. She likes sometimes to think she is, but she isn't. The selectmen work together with the departments to decide how much money they want to spend on everything. And then it comes to the selectmen, and then they give that information to us. She's right by statute, we make the budget, but I'll put that to rest. I want to address Mr. Gopalan's amendment. In the Budget Committee this last time, there was an effort to increase some monies in the fire and the police, which one could argue in favor of. I have no big debate with that myself at the end of the day. However, in order to accommodate that, they cleaned out public works. Is that the way you do business in this town? You sacrifice one for the other? I don't think so. Mr. Gopalan has suggested putting the money back, and he gave you some very good reasons for that. In the Budget Committee, in order to keep the budget at a certain level, rather than adding the money where they thought it was needed, they decided to clean it out of public works and put it in the places they wanted to put it. I don't agree with that philosophy at all. I want the money to keep our roads maintained. If you don't keep spending a little bit of money on the roads year after year, they're going to get worse than they are now. I know that the selectmen had a contracting company come in and say our roads are not bad compared to other towns. But just take a drive down Tide Mill Road sometime and tell me our roads are in good shape, okay? That's one example. So we have a lot of problems with roads in town, and to clean out that budget is totally inappropriate. And I voted against it in the Budget Committee. I made a lot of noise about it, and I rarely vote to increase the budget. I am probably one of the biggest tightwads in Hampton, but I support Art Gopalan's motion to increase this budget to take care of the things that we need to have done in our town. I have absolutely no problem saying that we need to take care of the roads and the drainage. I think it was totally wrong for the Budget Committee to clean out those accounts. That's just not any way to do business. That's all I have to say. Thank you. And I'm very emotional about this because I think it's wrong. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pierce. I'm going to go to the Budget Committee Chair, and then I'm going to get to Mr. Webb. Mary Louise Woolsey, then Mr. Webb.
Don't say I didn't warn you. Think in this economy, if you ask people to vote for the higher of two amounts on that warrant article, they're going to say no. And then all of you sitting here who vote in favor of this amendment, and by the way, there are two subsequent warrant articles that address road work for public works, if you vote for this amendment from people who are usually tightwads, then you ought to be very, very suspicious, because if you vote to pass this amendment, the Board of Selectmen will have, guess what? Another default budget. And it seems to me that Public Works ended up with $600,000 in surplus in 2009. How many roads could have been resurfaced and reconditioned and replaced with that money? Think about it. Absolutely no on inflating the Budget Committee's budget.
Thank you, Ms. Woolsey. Mr. Webb.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I'm going to go back in history again. What happened in 2002 when we looked at the manning of the fire department? We found that we had tremendous overtime. We found that we had ambulances that we could get to the particular site of an emergency, but we didn't have enough people to carry the patients out to the ambulance. We found people in the fire department were upset. They were asking for a reduction of their own income by hiring 4 new firemen. Now that's saying something. When people ask for less income so that they get people so that they can do the job. We hired those 4 firemen. We trained those 4 firemen. Training is an expensive process. So we have lost that. A few years later, when the selectmen decide, yes, there are long-term savings. Yes, we do have a happier fire department. But we have to look at today's economy and what we're spending at this particular moment. And they fired 4 firemen that we had just hired, that we had just trained. Now we're in a worse economic circumstance. And what are we doing? We're looking at the department's overtime again. Now, I realize that the demands of the fire department have grown.
Mr. Webb, I'm going to jump in here. I need to have you make the connection to Mr. Gopalan's amendment. I can't discern at the moment whether you're in favor of it or against it, and I need you to take a position and speak to it, please. The Gopalan amendment.
I'm sorry, I thought I was talking on the issue.
Well,
I will back off and come back on the issue.
Yeah, if you could, please. All right, Mr. DeMarco.
Victor Marco, 11 Milburn Avenue. I'm also an elected member to the Budget Committee. I stand opposed. I stand opposed to the article, or the amendment to the article. Hello? Okay. Mr. Pierce just spoke in regards to his position on the amendment and his recollection of what was done at the Budget Committee meeting. Just as a quick run, the Budget Committee is made up of 15 people, 12 elected to the Budget Committee, 3 appointed. One is a select person, one's a representative of the school department, and one's a representative of the precinct. At the particular review of the total budget, there were 13 members present. 2 of the appointed positions, the precinct commission and the school committee, were not present. The selectman representative was present, so it would give us a total of 13 people voting on this, on the revised, or should I say, the Budget Committee's budget as presented by us. The vote was 11-2. 11 elected officials that were elected by you voted to approve the budget as you see now. One opposition was Mr. Pierce, who was an elected official. The other was an appointed official, was the Board of Selectmen, who you would think would vote against it because it was against the initial proposal. That's just a little background of where we come from and how we got to the point where we are today. To address the idea of gutting out the Public Works Department is a false statement. We did not gut out the Public Works Roads Department. If people listened to the last Selectmen's meeting, there was a representative from Beta Corporation, which was hired by the town of Hampton to review the present conditions of the roads. I'm sorry, to review the present conditions of the roads. They gave us an 83% rating, which was very high for towns of our size. They estimated over the next 3 years we should spend approximately $400,000 a year on the roads to maintain it at that level. If you look at one of the proposed warrant articles, I'll give you Article 13. It says road improvements. For $300,000 coming out of the undesignated fund balance, which supposedly has no effect on the tax rate, which was excess money that was accumulated over the years, or basically last year, to be used. And the Board of Selectmen has felt that that $300,000 plus the $100,000, over $100,000 we left in the account, meets the engineering standards of keeping the roads as they are. We're not out to gut anybody. We made these changes to the department head and town manager's recommendation. We followed your department head and your town manager's recommendation on the wage accounts. That's what we did. We took the time, which I did not see happen at the selectmen's meeting, to listen to your department heads and your town manager explain the need line by line. We didn't meet in emergency sessions try to review the budget in 3 hours, which they did because they took all the time in the world to go over it. We took it line by line over a period of several months. We asked inquisitive questions, both for and against increases and decreases. Your department heads, and they're in the room right now, so you can ask them individually, made presentations to us that with the added $450,000 that was cut last year out of the wage accounts, and the $350 roughly that was going to be cut this year would have been $800,000 reduction in their wage accounts. We asked, what did that mean? And what effect would that have on public service safety? And here's some of the replies we got. Our fire chief explained to us that if this $350,000 and his proportion was cut off his wage account, they like to refer to his overtime account. I refer to his wages. Overtime is distributed to employees of this town on the complete sanction of your department head and town manager. It is not just taken arbitrarily when they feel like working. Your department heads are the ones who institute what overtime is and who should be filled by it and how it's filled contractually. They do not do it, haphazardly. Fire and police have to be proactive in their staffing. They cannot be reactive like the Public Works Department. If there's a major storm coming, they can reschedule people to come in and still be at overtime. Well, your police and fire don't have that option. If there's a riot at the beach or there's 20,000 people going to the casino some night, we don't have the option of bringing in mutual aid. There is no mutual aid. It's the people we have working for us that need to be called in on extra hours or extra shifts to accommodate the safety. Your fire department told us that there's a possibility right now. He runs at 7 people from 9. He goes from 9 to 7. If, in fact, that $350,000 again was taken out on the Board of Selectmen's suggestion out of the overall wage accounts for the town, we could possibly go down to 5 people on a given shift in the fire department from 9. Well, let me tell you what that means for being a police officer for 30 years, so I don't need to ask him. What that means is you would end up with 5 people working, running an ambulance, a ladder truck, and an engine. You'd have 2 at the beach and 3 uptown. So if there was a fire at the beach, you could drive the fire truck there and you'll watch it burn because there's not enough people to man it. If there's an ambulance call and it goes out of town, There's 2 people gone. The third person uptown would respond with an engine truck and stand by to help if you need anything. If they responded to the hospital from that point, we would have 3 people in town fighting. So, how do you know that? Are we willing to accept that? This town, not more than 5 years ago, or 3 years ago, reinstated 4 people that were cut by the Board of Selectmen, that Board of Selectmen, back to the fire department, so that we would have 2 active ambulance services in town available. We would have a sufficient fire people on duty to man the ladder trucks and the engines. We're not at that point anymore. And what are we talking about here? Let's talk that $300,000 figure. Let's see what we're saving here. That's 3.3 cents per 100,000. That's 10 cents. 10 cents on my tax rate. If I have a house that's worth $300,000, that's $30. I'm going to save $30 for not having 2 ambulances on duty, not having sufficient police at the summertime or during any other emergency, not having fire apparatus available to apply to my job. For 80 cents a month, I'm not willing to buy that. I'm not willing for that savings. We always talk hundreds of thousands, $500,000, 500,000. Let's talk the reality of it all. We're talking about the effect on the average homeowner in the town of Hampton. It's my belief that they want 2 ambulances on service. They want 9 firefighters on duty. They want sufficient police and public works. I'm talking to the article.
Mr. DeMarco, the amendment on the floor, $214,000 by Mr. Gopalin. I've given you some leeway.
I'm opposed to the 8,000. I feel bad that I'm not able to continue further because I think the townspeople that are watching on TV and those present need to know the facts. And all I am presenting is facts. I'm not presenting my point of view. I'm presenting facts. And if that's the case, I'm opposed to his amendment because there's two issues here. One, as Mary Louise, our chairman, so adequately explained, it would put the operating budget above the default budget. And you know how that works. We would go back to the default budget. And our budget, the Budget Committee's budget, if what we're talking about, was...
No, we're talking about the Gopalin amendment. I've heard one point. If you have a second point to make on that,
Yes.
I'd ask you to do so.
Our budget is $2,000 less than what the town selectmen proposed. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Lassard.
First, I have a question on the amendment. Is that taking anything away from the fire or police? Are we just adding?
Simply adding an amount of money so that we have a new bottom line.
Okay, and so that money, the way I just heard, would be going into drainage and roads repair.
The amendment on the floor is simply to increase the bottom line of this budget by a sum certain.
All right. Thank you. Now, I'm speaking in favor of the motion to add that. I watch around. We got the greatest fire department, the greatest police, all the town help are great people. But when you take away and force people to sue the town of Hampton because you took it away before the drainage money, I say the money should be put back in for maintenance of roads and also for maintenance of sewer and take care of it because you got another lawsuit sitting right in an office if we don't do something. Now, if you give me 2 seconds, I sat on the Board of Selectmen in the 1970s, and I want to tell you something. I'm ashamed when I think back how we maintained our road with $100,000 a year, and we never had that cut. Then all of a sudden it's get cut. I think we're being pound foolish right now. Penny wise and pound foolish. I think if we give that money, don't take nothing away from the fire, the police, and I say give them the tools to work with. And I've said this even when Mary Louise Woolsey was on the board with me. Give them the materials, give them the money to do the job, make them do their job. If they don't do the job, then come and squawk. But don't shuffle around. I saw that night and I was applauded. take care of, I'm in favor of this motion. The
The motion to amend the Gopalin amendment. All right. We have been on the budget generally for...
I've had my hand up for quite a while.
For about 2.5 hours. I'm not going any further than Ms. Latimer. We're going to hear from Mr. Nichols. But I would urge those who are coming to the microphone, be succinct, be on the point, be on the amendment, and then after Ms. Latimer, we'll take a sense of the meeting. Mr. Trainer.
Peter Trainer, I'm a member of the Budget Committee, 59 Presidential Circle. I'm speaking in opposition of the motion that's on the floor for 3 different reasons. Number one, it's been presented that all the money was put back into overtime accounts for fire and police only. The money that was dispersed in our proposed budget to the people of Hampton put money in the library, police, fire, the Rockingham County engineering study, and a few other places. And I want to draw on a comment that Attorney Gerald said when he was speaking, was that the town has 3 very important functions, and functions that are very critical to this town, and that was police, fire, and highways. There is already 2 amendments in the proposed articles that are going to go to the town voters. 2 of the articles put money into roads and the highway department at no cost to the taxpayers at all from money that was left over from last year. The highway department still turned in additional money that wasn't used for roads last year. Whether it was because of weather-related problems that they couldn't get contracts in or not, I don't know. We had such a sunny summer last year. But it was mentioned earlier that the firemen got 3 additional employees. The 4 additional employees. The 4 additional employees only cut the overtime from the department in half. The fire department, to this day, is still at least 4, if not 8 firemen understaffed. That's why there is overtime. That is why there is no ambulances. Only 1 ambulance is manned. The second one has to have a call-in. And as far as the roads are concerned, excuse me, I listened to you. I'm talking about the roads.
Trainer,
If you
Mr.
give
Trainer,
me a chance
Mr.
to
Trainer.
finish and don't interrupt me.
Mr. Trainer.
I'm sorry, Mr. Mahoney.
I'd like to have the privilege of the microphone to address this body. You will do the following. You will address the amendment. The amendment simply is, should we increase this budget in the amount that Mr. Gopalin has suggested? That is the issue on the floor. We may get back to the budget as a whole for discussion, but right now, the issue I think these people in the audience are looking for, are you in favor of the Gopalin amendment or are you opposed to it? I'll say that same thing to the people in line and to Mr. Nichols. So please, with that suggestion, are you in favor of the Gopalin amendment? Please speak to the amendment.
No, I am not, Mr. Moderator. And the third point I was trying to make was recently the town had a survey and a study done on its roads, and 84% was the rating on the roads. That's why I'm speaking against it, that there's 2 other articles that address putting money into roads and highway department. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Trainer. Mr. Nichols, then Mr. Rice.
Yeah, I just want to quickly make a correction to a couple of factual issues brought up by Mr. DeMarco. Mr. DeMarco indicated that the selectmen removed $350,000 in wages from the manager's proposed budget. The number was $300,000, not $350,000. Mr. DeMarco also indicated that the selectmen removed $450,000 in the spring and put it in a holding account, and that those were all from wages. Of that $450,000, $300,000 were from wages, $150,000 were from other accounts. So combining the 2, Mr. DeMarco's figures were off by $200,000. Thank you. And I confirm that with the finance director.
Thank you, Mr. Nichols. Mr. Rice.
Fred Rice, 15 Heather Lane. I have a procedural question regarding the application of the budget that I think pertains to this amendment. the moderator has referenced that this is a bottom line increase, and we keep hearing the term, the bottom line budget. It has always been my understanding that the way you put a budget together is to add line item, you go line item by line item to see what you need for a particular function, you add them all up, and that is the bottom line function that you have. And that the state has granted the ability to boards of selectmen and administrative bodies to be able to move those totals around from line item to line item in order to satisfy the more urgent needs of the town. Last night, in preparation for this meeting, I reviewed a couple of the Budget Committee videos online, and one was the December 10th meeting at which Mrs. Woolsey asked Mr. Nichols to define how when you modify the budget, whether you have the proposed budget or the default budget, if there is a different way in which you are able to make those changes. And Mr. Nichols, you addressed that, and I believe what you said, and I'd like you to, Mr. Moderator, I'd like you to ask Mr. Nichols to restate this and clarify it so that everybody's on the same sheet of music on it. That if it's a regular budget, that you are more obligated to stay with the line items that were proposed to begin with, but that if it goes to a default budget, everything falls to the bottom line, and you can essentially reconstruct the entire budget to be what you want it to be after it's passed. Is that correct? And if not, would you please explain that so that everybody understands it? I think that it has a significant bearing on making modifications like this. If we're not making it to a line item and there's no obligation to keep spending in that area, then the money that Mr. Gopalan proposes could go to something completely different. He has no control over. All it does is give the selectmen more money to spend. So could you clarify that, please?
What I can tell you is that the RSA that covers transfers of funds and the ability of the governing body is RSA 3210, and that there is a moderate amount of case law associated with that. My knowledge is primarily in the area of the default budget, having reviewed the Supreme Court case of Sullivan versus Hampton. And it is my interpretation that in the case of a default budget, based on that ruling, that the selectmen essentially have carte blanche to transfer between accounts as they see fit. And I base that on the fact that the first sentence of 3210 states that when there is a change in the Supreme Court ruling, they made the statement that the fact that the budget was not approved is a change unto itself. Okay, so that's my where I get my understanding, and that's what my understanding is, and it's in the context of the default budget. I don't think it would be productive for me to start talking about what the laws and case laws are within the context of the normal operating budget, because I don't believe I'm qualified to answer that question, having not reviewed case law in that area. So that's basically what I have stated. My statements have been more directed to the default budget because that's where my knowledge is.
Okay. It had always been my understanding that certainly the Board of Selectmen should have the authority to make moves when it was an emergency or essential to do so. I won't say emergency, but essential to do so. We've got to take it out of the fire department, and we've got to put more into roads or vice versa. And I can see that, but I don't see any assurance in the way, if we go to a default budget on all of this, which we probably will in most years, it seems to be a tool whereby it benefits the Board of Selectmen and gives them even more flexibility, because then they can go back and recast the entire budget. And I think that people need to keep that in mind when they are considering an amendment such as this. If we are forced into a default budget, your amendment goes poof. Even though there may be more money in there, if we go to a default budget, doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be spent on what you said. If we stay on the regular budget, if people are smart enough to vote for the regular budget, there is more of a restriction. Personally, I would like to see something where if you took it from one line, that you had to show to the people where you took it from and where you put it during the year. We had to take so much money out of this account and put it into this one, because then this makes sense. I'm not advocating for or against Mr. Gopalan's amendment. I just want it clarified so that people understand the ramifications of what happens when they vote one way or the other on this, and whether we end up with the default budget being the lower figure, in which case people will vote for it. I don't care if it's $10 difference, or whether they vote for the regular budget, which would keep it closer to the line items you're talking about. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rice. Ms. Latimer, in a sense of the meeting. The amendment before us is to amend the budget from $24,364,484 to $24,681,058. Ms. Latimer.
Okay, thank you. Speaking against the amendment by Mr. Gopalan for numerous reasons. One of the biggest one is that the Budget Committee has spent a lot of time this year, probably more man-hours than at any time that I've seen in the past decade, looking at all the line items on the budget, because we've gotten to a point where we have needs and we've had wants and we've gotten rid of all the wants, and there are things that are going begging. Mr. Pierce is probably correct in saying that we should never strip one budget in a department for another, yet that's exactly what we're doing. We've been stripping fire, and we've been stripping all our protective services, police, to a core, to the point where I walk the streets this summer, that I'm down all the time at the beach, and you had members of the business community down there wanting to bring in outside protection because they felt that there was a shortfall. And ladies and gentlemen, we had rain up until the third week in July. So let's hope that it rains all summer again, because we're in the same boat. On the same note, we know that we don't have enough ambulance coverage. We're calling outside, we're giving funds out there. And I'm not going to stand here and advocate for each one of the departments and each one of the shortfalls. Those are the ones that I've seen up close, personal. People have come to me. We've dealt with line by line, issue by issue by issue. And when we got down to it, we looked at this budget, we looked at every line, we looked at where we needed to put things back, but we also looked at the fact that we are in a horrible, horrible economy, and nobody can afford any more money out of their tax dollars. So how do we reapportion that? Well, I think when we have a department that comes in and says, we came in $600,000 over, and we saved you $600,000, and we have so much money left over that now that money can be used to buy a salt shed without even putting it in a vote. That's an area that you look at. You have to take into consideration that department was able to come in okay. And we have a couple of other departments that are not okay. And with respect to the voters out there and their needs, we came in with a budget that was less than the default budget. It was not done easily. It was not done by just sitting there and saying, we're just going to strip public works. We had several individuals that came in with totally different punch lists that were put before our board of areas that we could conceivably reduce. I won't say cut, but conceivably reduce. And that when we get into a position when we have to start talking about cuts and removing and transferring and this and that, we have to make some really strong decisions. It's not enough to just say no. No, I don't want to spend this week so that maybe next week it costs us twice as much. That's the charge that the Budget Committee has in looking over these lines one by one, issue by issue by issue by issue. And somehow when I hear, and I will forever be on this case, the thing of response time of emergency services in our community. When we're calling to the outside, we have to reapportion how we're looking at, because you only have so minutes once you stop breathing. I probably say this to a point of boring some people, but 3 minutes is 3 minutes. So, you know, let's put it to a task, hold your breath for 3 minutes, and somebody make a call. And if we're calling to another town for an ambulance to respond to us, then we have a problem. But this was how the budget was gone over. These were the recommendations that were made. Yes, we made recommendations to put money back into part-time wages. And might I remind you, we have part-time wages because we do not fill full-time positions. That gives you overtime. I'm sorry, I said part-time, I mean overtime. We have overtime wages because we don't fill full-time positions. That's where a lot of the overtime comes from. So we look to put it back in there, and because Department of Public Works had such a surplus, we felt this was an area that could be trimmed. They were our recommendations. You're right, Mr. Rice. This is a bottom-line budget. And we have more faith in the fact that if we pass a budget, that the lines will go where they should initially. If we have emergencies, those lines will be moved. If we pass a default budget, we lose, as far as I'm concerned, all control. And it goes to the Board of Selectmen entirely. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Latimer. We've had discussion on the Gopalin amendment.
Bob, can I provide one factual
No, I'd like to fulfill my promise. I'd like to get a sense of the meeting. All those in favor of further discussion, raise your hands. Okay. I think it's pretty clear that we're ready. I'm going to ask for a vote on the Gopalin amendment. A vote in the affirmative is a vote to increase the budget to $24,681,058. So if that is your disposition, you are going to hold up your voter card on the yes time. And if you are opposed to the Gopalin amendment and you want to keep the budget figure as stated, you will vote no. So all those in favor of the Gopalin amendment, increasing the bottom line of the budget to $24,681,058, please raise your voter card. Down card. All opposed? I declare that the Gopalin amendment has been defeated. We are back to the stated budget figure.
Move the question, Mr. Moderator.
Let's take the sense. All those in favor of moving on to next article? Do we need to discuss it any further? Down cards? All right. We are done with Article 8. The budget article will appear as stated. There's a motion to restrict reconsideration on Article 8 made by Ms. Woolsey. Do I have a second? Seconded by Mr. Pluff. All those in favor? Raise your card. Down cards. Any opposed? Article 8 is restricted. Thank you for your patience in getting through the budget this morning. We're on to Article 9. Shall the town of Hampton vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $546,000 to fund the purchase without further bidding of a Pierce Rescue pumper truck for the Hampton Fire Department? Majority vote required. Such authorization shall include all engineering, design, procurement, construction, shipping, delivery, training, together with all related appurtenances and activities necessary or desirable to complete the purpose of this article. Recommended by the Board of Selectmen, recommended by the Budget Committee. Entertain a motion to open discussion on Article 9, moved by Mr. Lally, seconded by Mr. Bateman. Is there someone who would like to speak? Would the Chief like to speak to Article 9?
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to speak in favor of support of this article to replace one of our 4 pumpers. The Hampton Fire Department has traditionally maintained for the past 40 years, at least, 5 pumpers. About 10 years ago, we were unable to continue to maintain one of those 5, and it was placed out of service and removed from service. That left us with 4 pumpers. Why do we maintain 4 pumpers? Well, our insurance rates for the town of Hampton are set based on recommendations of an organization called the Insurance Services Organization. And the ISO bases their rating on a number of factors: what our water supply is, what our staffing is, where our fire stations are located, and what our ability to deliver water in a certain volume to a fire incident is. And based on their recommendation and the current rating, we're required to maintain 4 pumpers. In 2001 and 2002, because 2 of our remaining 4 pumpers were in need of replacement, we purchased 2 Smeal pumpers, leaving the 2 older 1988 Emergency 1 pumpers in service as reserve apparatus. Today, 8 years later, Those two 1988 Emergency 1 pumpers are in excess of 20 years of age. We tend to think of vehicle usage in terms of mileage. With fleet vehicles, their usage is really dependent on the number of hours that vehicles are used for. The two 1988 E1 pumpers, with their present hours in the neighborhood of 18 or 19,000 hours, equates to over 500,000 miles. 500,000 miles at a 20-year or older piece of fire apparatus is beyond its useful life. So while we do need to replace 2 pumpers, we're presently only asking to replace 1. We're asking to replace engine 1 of the two 1988 Emergency 1 pumpers, because engine 1 will not pass its pump test. It has failed and cannot be counted as one of the necessary 4 pumpers to continue to maintain our ISO rating. The image that is on the screen is a sample image of a Pierce pumper that meets our specification. Now, our specification was based on a number of factors. While we did replace the 2 pumpers in 2001 and 2002, we've learned a lot about the nature of the environment that we live in here. Being a coastal community, being continuously exposed to salt ocean air is tremendously harmful to our apparatus. I went further inland to Peterborough and Jaffrey this week and looked at a few of their pumpers that were 10 and 15 years old and was very surprised at the condition. Well, there were 2 important factors. One is they're not exposed to the same environment, and secondly, they don't respond to the same number of calls that we do annually. So we need to develop a specification for a pumper that's going to give us longevity and also reduce some of our maintenance costs. In 2001 and 2002, we paid about $365,000 each for the 2 Smeal pumpers. In the past 3 years, since we've been maintaining electronic maintenance records, we have spent in excess of $90,000 in maintenance cost on one of those 2 pumpers, in excess of $60,000 in maintenance cost on the other. And both of those pieces of apparatus are about 8 years old. So we realized that in new specifications, we needed to change some of our requirements so that we could ensure greater longevity. Now, a few things have changed that have affected cost as well in that period of time. In 2009, the standard by which fire apparatus is designed and manufactured changed. Those changes required increased safety features for the vehicles, as well as a number of other operational features for fire apparatus, and those came with an increase in cost. In 2010, the Diesel Emission Reduction Act requires that new diesel-powered apparatus have emission systems to reduce their diesel harmful emissions. And as a result, that comes with an added cost. So the cost of apparatus has increased. We have looked at varying manufacturers. I had spent some time researching cost of recently delivered pumpers nationwide, not just in one particular geographic area. And the replacement cost in 2009 of a pumper with a similar specification to what Hampton uses was about $500,000. Add to that the increased cost for the change in standard, the change in emission requirements, and you can see that we're now asking for $546,000 to replace a pumper. Pierce is an ISO 9001 certified company. They have among the highest quality control standards among fire apparatus manufacturers. We have built into a number of features to help improve longevity, such as changing the body construction material. Years ago, we built our apparatus from steel. In 1982, we purchased a steel-bodied aerial ladder. 8 or 9 years later, it completely rotted out, and we had to completely refit it with an aluminum body. We've learned that aluminum does not withstand corrosion in the salt air environment. So our new pumper specification is of stainless steel, as is all of the plumbing and pump components, because it improves resistance to corrosion. I could bore you with lengthy details on this specification, but I think before lunch, I would prefer not to unless there are specific questions about it. I would ask that you support this article so that we can replace at least one of the two pumpers at this time. Thank you.
Moderator. Thank you, Chief Silver. Mr. Lau.
In deference to the hour of the day, I'll keep this brief, but this unanimous recommendation by the Board of Selectmen. As you just heard the chief say, we've spent $150,000 in repairs for two of these trucks. I think this is desperately needed. In fact, I'd asked the chief at the 2 meetings ago if we should be talking about 2 pumpers instead of 1, but he's very happy to get 1 if he can. Also, don't have to remind people on the west side of town how important it is to have good working equipment pumper trucks. So we're certainly in favor of this article.
Thank you, Mr. Lally. Mr. Moody.
Art Moody, 3 Thompson Road. I'll just throw out a couple of questions. Just some comments. We're replacing emergency 1 pumper, which was the precincts, or still is, I don't know. We bought one the same year, emergency 1, that we're not replacing. I'm wondering why this isn't done like we did, the town did in '88, 3-year note. Certainly interest rates are historic low, and with relatively low inflation, it probably won't cost anything for the interest and the purchasing power. People who move into town next year, or new construction, next year and the year after, won't have to pay anything for this protection. And that's why capital expenditures this amount usually go to a bond or a note. I read that town to our south is replacing engine 1.
Thank you.
For $200,000 less than this amount. So those are the sort of the rhetorical questions that I am putting out here.
Thank you, Mr. Moody. Chief, do you wish to address Mr. Moody's questions?
I apologize. I couldn't hear the questions from back here.
As I understand, the gist of the question was this warrant article, Article 9, is being presented as a pay the entire purchase price in 1 year. Mr. Moody wondered why or whether there had been any consideration given to paying for the piece of equipment over a period of up to 3 years.
Yes. In fact, last year, a warrant article was presented for the replacement of a pumper, and it was essentially a very similar specification. The cost of the warrant article in total was $576,000 to fund that purchase over a 4-year lease purchase period. If we were to approach that again this year, the total cost would increase by about $10,000 or $15,000, and the total purchase cost would be in the neighborhood of $586,000 to $590,000.
Thank you, Chief Silver. Anyone else wishing to be heard? Yes, sir.
Morning. I'll keep it short and quick. I'm on Hampton Falls Fire Department. I'm also a resident of Hampton.
Excuse me, sir. I just need you to identify yourself by
Brian
name.
Kent, 35 Park Ave.
Thank you.
Sorry, sir.
No problem.
Again, I'm on the fire department in Hampton Falls. We're the town to the south that is spending probably $200,000 less on a fire truck, like was questioned. We cut almost $170,000 of useful material off the truck just to get it through the budget this year for ourselves, which we're in the middle of our town meeting trying to get. $546,000 believe it or not, is a reasonable price for a truck, especially with today's emissions, computers, everything that we're required to have in these vehicles for the NFPA. Like I said, I live in this town. I'm on a volunteer fire department in another town that does mutual aid to this town to support. I do it because I love it. Do I have a problem with $546,000? No. This truck here, I think we're doing a smart idea, replacing 2 older pieces of equipment that are rotting, costing us a fortune in maintenance, and if we don't pass it, we're going to spend more money in maintenance. I can give you one other situation where the Hampton Falls Police Department is now into 3 cruisers that they haven't replaced. Their replacement cost on those alone have already bought them a cruiser. You know, if we're smart, we'll pass Article 9, let them have a new truck. That'll save us on all the headaches.
Thank you. Mr. Renier.
Richard Rennie 29 Highland Ave. 2 points. I've listened to Chief Silver on a number of occasions on his presentation of the need for a new fire truck. And it's very impressive, and I fully support the purchase of this fire truck. The second point is, I don't know about any of you other people here, but I hate paying the interest on my credit card. When the chief tells me that, or the appropriation for this purchase, to stretch it out over a period of time would cost somewhere around $40,000 in interest to fund or to purchase this truck, I'm dead set against that. The idea of an outright purchase of something that is direly needed in this town, I think is the right way to go, and I do support this article. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Renier. Anyone else wishing to be heard? Mr. Gopal. Given the hour, my plan is to conclude on this article and then recess for lunch. So this will be the last article that we address before the lunch recess. Mr. Gopal.
Art Gopalan, 20 Windmill Lane. My question is not so much whether to support or not to support, but the question is with regard to one item on the warrant article which says further bidding of a Pierce Rescue Pumper truck. Is this a no-bid contract, or what is the town requirement or policy, if there is one, with regard to bidding of equipment like this, capital equipment like this? I'm seeking clarification because I think that it is important that we keep to bidding rather than no bid. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gopalan. Is there anyone on the Board of Selectmen who wishes to address Mr. Gopalan's question relative to any bidding policy?
I think that's best answered by the chief.
Chief, would you like to address Mr. Gopalan's question?
Quite simply, sometimes you can purchase equipment and you can purchase it through competitive bidding, and sometimes the areas are territorial. So to purchase this pumper or a pumper to meet this specification would only come through one dealership for our area. So there really wouldn't be any advantage to bidding this pumper. The price would come in at the same price.
Thank you, Chief Silver. Anyone else wishing to be heard on Article 9? Ms. Woolsey.
I just want to clarify for you so that you're not scared when you look at the article. It's not Mike Pierce who's going to be building the engine. So don't be all worried. I am opposed in principle to funding capital expenditures all in one year. That's equipment and construction. However, in this case, you have a dead engine, dead. 1 out of 4 engines, pumpers that pump water on your fires is dead. It needs to be replaced. This chief has gone to extraordinary lengths to put this proposal together. He knows exactly what type of equipment is needed. I have tremendous faith in him and what he is accomplishing in this department. He needs this engine. We need to do it now. Don't quibble about how or whatever. This has to be done. I absolutely, firmly support this article and the chief's request.
Thank you, Ms. Woolsey. Mr. Silverdick.
Norman Silverdick, 70 Tide Mill Road. My only question regarding this, and I don't
dispute the necessity for it was the why we would not consider using our unexpended fund balance or surplus, since we have so much of that designated for other projects far in excess of $546,000, because the effect of passing this article raises the tax rate by 18 cents, which wipes out the reduction of 18 cents from the operating budget. So effectively, there'll be no change to the overall tax rate, whereas if we use part of the surplus that was being created from the prior operating budget, you could fund the truck without affecting any tax rate whatsoever, and we'd still have an 18-cent savings.
Thank you, Mr. Silverdick. Does anyone care to respond to the question about whether this could have been?
Happy to attempt to answer it, but to be quite honest with you, with the echoes, I couldn't really follow Norman's question. If you could repeat the
Mr.
question.
Silverdick asked why this purchase or proposed purchase was not funded all or in part from any surplus that the town may enjoy.
The reason for that, if you look at some of the numbers associated with the surplus, the undesignated general fund balance, which is also referred to as a surplus, was about $2.9 million at the end of 2008. It appears this year, although we haven't completed the audit, I think Mike is indicating we should probably be up to the area of about 3.8 million this year. The items that we have already designated, okay, in our warrants to be paid for out of the undesignated general fund balance, the $340,000 for public works capital equipment, the $260,000 associated with the roads, and the $150,000 associated with the salt shed bring us down into the level where we're in the ballpark of what some of the different accounting-related organizations, whether it's DRA or whatever, recommend. Funding that out of the undesignated general fund balance would bring us below a level where we're comfortable at.
Thank you, Mr. Nichols. Anyone else wishing to be heard on Article 9? Seeing none, Article 9 will appear on the ballot as written. Since we are at the, excuse me, Mr. Griffin.
Yes, I would like to make a motion that we take Article 36 ahead of schedule where it's been discussed.
Well, why don't we deal with we finished Article 9. I understand that suggestion, but really what I'd like to do is get us to our lunch break, unless there's any other motions that pertain to Article 9. Ms. Woolsey.
Reconsideration.
Ms. Woolsey has moved to restrict reconsideration of Article 9, seconded by Mr. Plouffe. May I see a show of hands, all those in favor of restricting reconsideration of Article 9? Down, cards. Any opposed? Article 9 is restricted. I'd like to defer your request, Mr. Griffin, until we resume. At this time, we'll take a recess. I do want everyone in this room to know that there is food in the hall, purchase of which would support the Winnicott girls basketball operations team. So I urge you to support them. Let's take a 45-minute break and be back here at 10 minutes to 1 to pick up on the warrant. Thank you.
Oh, I like that.